watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, and welcome to The Establishing Shot, a podcast where we center around deep dives into directors and their filmographies. We are in the middle of a Wes Anderson series. Yes. And it's been really fun so far. We are 5 episodes in. This is the 5th episode. Started with the overview of Wes, and then did episodes on Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, and last week was the Royal Tenenbaums. And this week we are covering the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, or Zissou. I've always said Zissou, but I'm 99% sure in the movie they say Zissou.
Zissou, yeah.
That's right.
Zissou.
Yes.
Not to be confused with that recent Nazi killing film, Zissou.
Yes. Not that. Well, this is JP, Jean-Pierre Boudreaux, but all his friends call him JP, I believe. So, yeah, JP, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you got into movies, all that.
Yeah, so my name is Jean-Pierre Boudreaux. Most people call me JP. So I currently live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I do freelance videography, filmmaking, trying to break into like doing more documentary kind of content. I work on set sometimes, PA, camera department, really just try and stay busy and keep a roof over my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as far as how I got into movies, I'm one of those guys, like growing up, like I've always really been like super imaginative. Like, if I read a book, like it plays like a movie in my head, or someone like, is telling a story, like I see it happening in my mind. My parents always tell me that they remember like when I was like 6, I found like a cow bone in a sandbox, and I was like a big dinosaur kid at the time. And I went on this whole like 5-minute monologue about what dinosaur it was and like what it ate and its lifestyle and all this stuff, like completely off of just finding like an obviously just a cow bone, So growing up, we always had a lot of movies. Like I can kind of remember when we got our first DVD player, because you got like a couple free movies with it when you bought it. One of them was we had the old like early 2000s Walking with Dinosaurs BBC documentary with like the CGI dinosaurs. I used to watch that all the time when I was a kid. That was like my favorite thing. So just grew up watching movies. My parents are both Gen X, so a lot of 80s stuff in the house growing up. So, my dad loved Star Wars, my mom loved Star Trek. Those are kind of some of my first, favorite franchises. As far as like my personally wanting to get involved, there was a time in my life where I wanted to be a crime scene investigator, because I love the show CSI, because I was watching it way earlier than I probably should have. Yeah. But I realized in real life, you don't get a cool music montage with the Who in the background. So I decided, I want to be an actor. Like that was kind of my thing. Like I've always liked performing and being in front of people. Never really had stage fright or anything like that. Yeah. And then my freshman year of high school, for a computer class, we had to make a movie because we were supposed to learn how to use Movie Maker, which, was like not good enough for me. So got in touch with like a friend of my dad who at the time I thought had a really nice camera, and like he had like one of the Final Cut Pro, whatever the edition was at the time. Right. Made this short film where I acted in it, and I also kind of sort of helped direct it and edit it, even though my dad kind of low-key took over the project. But did some of that too, and just fell in love with the entire process, and kind of been in some way, shape, or form making videos ever since. And, you know, as I've grown, I've learned a lot more about cinema, both as a fan of cinema, but also as a person who is interested in making films.
Right.
You know, and I think that as much as I argue with some of my friends, I think that that does, you know, lead me to kind of have a bit of a different perspective than some people that just really love watching movies. You know what I mean? So,
right.
but yeah, I mean, I've kind of been watching movies since I was a kid and just never stopped. And, you know, it's like my favorite thing to do is still to this day is go to the movie theater, even if it's like not as cool as it was like when I was a kid.
Right.
But yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it's still just as cool.
I mean, the problem is, it's like I still love going to the movie theater. I just wish the movie theater I went to like was nicer. You know what I mean? Like the couple AMC's we have here in New Orleans are like, sometimes I'll go there, the screen is not properly formatted, or it's a little blurry, or I went and saw Black Widow with our youth group here at my church, and dude, there was like the edge of every like polygon, so to speak, on screen had like a red green hue to it because there was like a short in the wire. And it was a little out of focus. We had to watch the whole movie like that. And I'm just like, and then then I have my friend who's like, that's why movie theaters suck. I'm like, no, it's just, you know, if it was a better quality, you wouldn't be saying that. But anyway,
I've always wanted for a while now. I've wanted, you know, we don't even have AMC's here in Lafayette.
Yeah,
we have the Grand.
I was at a good time with the Grand.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's fine. But for a while now, I've thought like, man, it would be a good idea in our little like downtown area to open up like an art house like theater with like a nice lobby and all that sort of stuff. That would be so cool to be able to just show good stuff on good screens with good projectors.
Right. We have a few of those here in New Orleans. There's like the Broad Street Theater. There's a couple others like the Britannia. Yeah. The Britannia, I think, literally has one screen, and so they show like one movie there, or they, you know, will do like special events and stuff. But which is, it's like the Broad's really cool, but it's like very small, and it's like it's great for like a date night. But like if I want to go see like the newest like Marvel movie or something, or the biggest blockbuster, like I'm not gonna go watch Oppenheimer at the Broad Theater. I'm sorry, I want to see that on the biggest screen I can. So you know, I feel like I'm there when the bomb goes off. So anyway, very excited for that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but if you are out there listening and you want to invest in that in Lafayette, you know, just reach out to me. You know, we'll make something happen. But yeah. So, what was your introduction to Wes Anderson?
Man, I feel like it's a name I've always heard. To be honest, even now, like enjoying, like having some of his films that I enjoy, he's not like my favorite director. Like I know a lot of people, I love the joke where it's like your barista's favorite director. I'm like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There is something to that, but I think the first time I really like, I mean, I always saw like trailers for his movies like growing up. But the first movie I think I really watched of his, like through like in its entirety, and like was like, wow, that was actually really good. And it's you're gonna think this is funny because I think it was the same as you, as Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was a class in college. I took a course called Film as Art and Entertainment. The whole class, it was my favorite class in school and in college, because like basically it was like a once a week 3-hour class, but we would just talk about movies. And like the first half of the class was like, what is a film as entertainment, which is subjective. Like what you find entertaining isn't the same as what I find entertaining necessarily. And then what film is art. Art is objective. You don't have to like it, but it's still art, you know? And so the second half of the class, we like watch like films based on class like suggestions. And one of those movies we watched was Moonrise Kingdom. And I was like, I loved it. Like, cinematography was great. The story was great. The sense of comedy, I really like. Like, I'm a very like, I like kind of cringe humor, awkward humor, randomness kind of stuff. A little bit of slapstick, and so I think Wes uses those kind of concepts in his very own way. Sometimes it's a bit
right.
but yeah, no, I think that's the first movie of his I watched. I remember I went and saw Isle of Dogs in theaters at the Broad Theater, actually, me and a couple of friends. Really liked that one. And at some point, I want to say, I think on a plane back from Germany after a mission trip, I watched Grand Budapest, which is still, I think, my favorite. I think that's his best film that he's made.
Yeah. Which is saying something, because you watched it on a plane and still thought it was
yeah. Well, and honestly, it was so crazy because I think that was like the first flight from Germany back to whatever our first stop in the U.S. was.
Yeah.
To get back to Louisiana. So like it's a long part of the flight, and like I was like really fighting hard not to laugh. Like it was really, really funny.
Yeah.
I'd argue that still probably might be his most approachable movie.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Gotcha.
and then at some point I've seen Steve Zissou previously. I did rewatch it for this episode, but I do know at some point before I have seen it and like enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit of my background with Wes Anderson. I'd say like, he's one of those directors where it's like he's not someone like I jump out of my seat every time he's making something. I like get really excited about it.
Right.
But it's someone who I really appreciate how he utilizes the art form, and I do appreciate the work that he has done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say Grand Budapest is his most approachable, which is, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I think in an episode in the past, I've said maybe you shouldn't jump like head first into Grand Budapest, just because, I don't know. Maybe it's not as like quote unquote Wes Anderson as this movie is. But yeah,
funny.
I say, yeah. I kind of am of the opinion that, and I've shared this in past episodes, that like Fantastic Mr. Fox is like the perfect introduction, because it creates like, it's animated. And so like that kind of, the way that he makes movies seems more palatable with animation than live action. So that's how I've always said, like, if I was going to introduce somebody to Wes Anderson, I would start them maybe with Fantastic Mr. Fox, and then I think, see if they like that, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's you're gonna hate me, but it's like I for no fault of my own, I still have not seen Fantastic Mr. Fox. Yeah. I really want to. It's on my list. I know I would love it. But I just never have had an opportunity to get around to watching it. But I think when I say the most approachable, as I don't know, it's like in one way, it's like visually, it's like the most Wes Anderson movie, in perspective to maybe some of his more recent stuff he's done is like very heavily Wes Anderson. But I
like
just
the
think
French Dispatch, especially.
Which I still haven't gotten around to watching, but I did want to see, or even like Asteroid City, the new one that's coming out. Yeah, I was like, my man just said pastel to the max. Like people almost look like orange and yellow in that movie. It's great. But I think when I say it's the most approachable, I feel like just the story and the jokes that land. When I feel like it's the most quotable. It's the one that has the most standout moments of what I've seen. To be honest,
it's his most successful, and I think that kind of goes to show it made the most money. So there's a lot to what you're saying for sure. But yeah, we're gonna jump into the content for today's show, which is the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. And it'll be fun to have you on, because you're on track to be a documentarian in some way, shape, or form, and here we are discussing a movie about a documentarian, basically. So it'll be fun to hear your perspective on what in the world is going on in this movie. But yeah, it's interesting. When I was doing my research, Wes kind of talked about how he had really, like, ever since he was making Rushmore, like, had it in his mind that he was going to make this movie. and even like discussed it with Bill Murray at the time, like, hey, I'm going to make this movie, you know, down the line. But it had been like an idea in his head, he said, for like 14 years. It's just been rattling around in his mind. And so it almost feels like, you know, from the research I've done, that seems like the furthest back I've heard him say, like, he had this idea for this movie. And I don't know, probably a lot of it has to do with, you know, he talks about loving, him and his family loved watching like Jacques Cousteau when they were kids. And so it probably has to do with, you know, that. And I don't know, maybe just a fascination with the sea, or who knows what it was.
I mean, who doesn't go through a like ocean phase? Like,
oh yeah, for sure.
I feel like if Wes Anderson was like born in like the late 80s, early 90s, as opposed to 1969, this would have been like a Shark Week style movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I feel like
so.
that's like, I can't think of any time I've ever seen any Jacques Cousteau documentary, but I feel like for me, if I was Wes Anderson, it'd be like, oh, I used to love watching Shark Week.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah. I mean, he does have his, you know, megalodon in his own way going on in this movie. So, you know, I guess there's some of that.
Right.
But yeah, this, what's funny, you know, we were just talking about Grand Budapest making so much money. This was actually his biggest budget. Like, the budget for this movie was $50 million. And I think Grand Budapest was like 25 million. So like the budget for this movie was double Grand Budapest, and
which is crazy because I don't think it doesn't look like a $50 million movie. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't mean that in a bad way. It has a very like lo-fi independent film look. You know?
Yeah, it does have that kind of look. But yeah, it don't make sense why it costs so much as we get into more of these, like, more of these details of how this film got made. But yeah, it also like was his, I don't know, you could probably say it's between this and Bottle Rocket of what was his biggest flop. Or what's been his biggest flop so far. So Bottle Rocket was, you know, we talked about on that episode, or in a recent episode, that had a $5 million budget. So pretty, you know, not small, but pretty small. And it only made like 400 to 500,000. So that's a pretty big flop, obviously. But this only made 35 million. So you're talking about, you know, a $15 million loss.
Well, and the general rule is, you know, not a lot of studios really put out like marketing numbers, but typically you want to assume that they spend almost as much as they put into the movie on marketing. Like sometimes, so like when you see a $50 million budget, it might have been a $25 million budget movie with 25 million for marketing, but sometimes it's like, oh, it's a $50 million budget film plus, you know, you can assume like another 50 million. You know, it's not always like hard and fast numbers, but they potentially lost a lot more if they're not factoring marketing into that kind of $50 million budget number.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it's funny. It's, you know, part of it is probably just, you know, he had gradually, like, Bottle Rocket lost money in box office, but it gained a huge cult following. And so Rushmore, you know, a lot of people saw Rushmore. And by the time Royal Tenenbaums came out, you know, he was really getting, you know, his feet under him. Just in as far as like people knowing who he is, people wanting to see his movies. And so at this point, he's kind of at the point where like Royal Tenenbaums made a ton of money. It was a big success. The studio's willing to give him like, hey, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Which is, you know, it's sort of, I guess it's not totally rare, but sort of rare to get, you know, that big early. That early on fourth movie to get just like, hey, whatever, because obviously like they were like, whatever you want to do with this movie, go for it, because he did. I mean, it's apparent.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of like some equivalents. Like that'd be like Insomnia era Christopher Nolan getting to like, make whatever he wanted. Like obviously Wes Anderson now, like he, not as much as like some of these other like like Christopher Nolan's or your Denis Villeneuve's, but I feel like he is one of those directors where when you see his name attached to something, it puts butts in seats.
Sure.
I think he's gotten to that point now, but so early on, like that's and like that happens sometimes, and I feel like it's a big gamble for a studio because obviously like there are examples where that goes really really well, and there's other examples where it's like giving a director like that much power too early, if it goes to their head or something, like you can really end up with a big mess, whether it be financially or the actual film's a mess or whatever, so so definitely interesting that's the decision they made like so early on in
for sure
and it's career, so to speak.
It's interesting because from all the interviews and stuff I've read, it just seems like from the get-go, Wes and Owen Wilson for his first 3 movies co-wrote with him, and this is his first one without Owen Wilson as a co-writer. But just from the get-go, Wes was just like, I am going to make my movies how I make my movies. And so I think there's a sense in which like I can
totally respect.
Yeah, people kind of respected that. Hey, like he's from the get-go, like from movie number 1, he hasn't been the kind of guy that's like one for me and one for you. We kind of talked about that in a past episode, like Jim Brooks, who produced Bottle Rocket, who's a big Hollywood producer, big name. He just kind of said, they basically like got themselves like creative freedom by just doing what they wanted to do the way they wanted to do it from the get-go, which is really like really cool. And this movie is like the culmination of that, really, like already movie number 4 in his career. It's already like kind of the culmination of like, I make movies the way I want to make movies.
Yeah.
But it's not, when you hear interviews with Wes, he's not snooty about it.
Right.
He's actually like, when you listen to him, you can tell he just loves it. People will ask him questions about like why he did something the way he did it. And like a lot of times he'll try to give them like the sort of answer a director would normally give a little bit, but then he'll always come back to, but really like at the end of the day, the reason I did it that way is because I really loved it that way. Which to me is just like really endearing. It's like, he loves thinking about like the way something should be shot and like executing it,
Yeah. Well, I think also with Wes Anderson specifically, it's like there's nobody else that can do a Wes Anderson movie like Wes Anderson.
Exactly.
And like you're not, I mean, like Kevin Feige's not going to hire Wes Anderson to direct a Marvel movie.
No.
Not every filmmaker wants to be that or can be like that, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, he's someone who obviously like he has a very, very specific way. Like he has a very specific lens through which he tells stories. And
right. He has his own voice.
Right. And like, you got to respect that, and it just so happens that because there's a lot of filmmakers that do have their own voice, but it just so happens with Wes Anderson, it's very abstract a lot of times.
Right.
So.
And really like he's not the only one that has had like a fairly early like flop. He had this film in his mind for years. So obviously like there's something very like personal to him about it. And I was kind of looking up other films that were made by like just like successful directors early on that flopped because they were very personal, not necessarily because they were personal films. They just happened to be very personal films that like flopped. Like Scorsese made New York, New York. And it was kind of his, like, he loved all those old musicals, and it was very personal to him because he was like, hey, I'm a movie maker now. I want to make my own like version of those old musicals. And it just like, it did terrible. Like, which I've seen it. It's actually really good. It just didn't get good reception. But like Spielberg made 1941, which was very personal for him. Flop, kind of a flop. Jacques Tati's Playtime, which is a very like, I haven't seen it. I've seen some frames from it. It's one that I'd like to eventually see. French filmmaker, very like abstract vignette kind of movie. Francis Ford Coppola's Once from the Heart, which I haven't seen either. But apparently a very like personal film. All of these were like huge directors that made these films fairly early on that just like just didn't do well. So, you know, I guess Wes is in good company as far as that goes.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, you got to think like for every one of your Spielberg's 1941s, there's a plethora of directors that their very first movie like flopped and then they never worked again, or they made a couple movies and then one flops. And like I'll give you an example. I recently like decided to watch like Nightmare on Elm Street, and then I watched the remake, and I actually liked the remake a little bit better. Like I thought, I don't know if it's just like I'm not a fan of like at first I don't really like slashers. I just kind of watched them just to watch them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just like the first one was like got a little too much 80s cheese for me. But I liked this. I thought the backstory of Freddy Krueger was a little bit better than the remake, and I thought some of the direction was actually a little interesting. But that's the only movie that guy ever made because it was a critical and commercial failure, and I'm assuming he got blacklisted, and they thought he was box office poison, and it just makes you feel bad. It does. So it's interesting when you hear about like Spielberg's 1941 or Scorsese's New York, or even this movie with Wes Anderson, because it's like it makes you want to like really deep dive into what did someone see in them, or what about them made somebody feel like you deserve another chance. Because you could find thousands of examples of people who their first movie or one of their first movies does really poorly, and they literally never like their career just ends. Like they don't even get to do something else in the industry. They just
I feel like,
you know.
Yeah, I feel like some of it's almost just like kind of luck of the draw. Like Wes and his little bunch got really lucky, and they just happened to have like a connection that, you know, had, you know, friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing, and got connected with someone that, you know, wanted to invest in them. And then, you know, Martin Scorsese does a piece in Esquire like on about Wes Anderson and how much like, you know, basically he was like, Martin Scorsese felt like president of the Bottle Rocket fan club, you know? And so it really helps like for studios to see, you know,
Wes Anderson was punching the air when he read that.
Like, yeah. It's like, you know, for a studio to see, oh, Jim Brooks like took a chance on these guys. Oh, Martin Scorsese loved this movie. It kind of helps to, I guess, for studios to see that sort of thing and be like, well, there must be something to this guy that we should invest in, even if, you know, the studio execs can't see it themselves. He's not necessarily like the guy that makes movies in a way where they're like, oh yeah, we definitely can see how we can make the money on this one. But yeah, it's kind of luck of the draw. Like, did you happen to have the right, you know, be born into the right family that has the right connections, that has the friend of the friend of the friend, you know?
Yeah, I could definitely say from being on the other side of it is that like you know, being a PA is a little easier because like you like literally, I'm telling you, bro, literally sometimes on set they just need a warm body to stand on a street corner and tell people not to walk into the shot.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to move into like other departments, like camera, like grip, like electric, it can be really difficult because for a lot of different reasons, like no one wants to be the person to give you your first shot. And so it's important for those people that are willing to take a chance on you. So, you know, I was just, again, listening to a little bit of the backstory of like how Wes's career got started. You're right. Like he had a couple people who saw something in him that they said, you know what, like I like this kid. Like, there's something
Mm-hmm.
here. Like let's take a chance on him. And I think that in a lot of different areas of life, like it's so important to like be able to like have those relationships. And also, like, I feel like when you get into positions, like to be that person is also really important as well.
Right,
You know?
right. Yeah, and it feels like, it feels like Wes was that, Wes has been that person for other people too. And honestly, like, we'll get into it in just a bit, but you can kind of see that theme of legacy in this movie a little bit.
Mm.
But yeah, he took a chance. Jason Schwartzman for Rushmore, that was his first ever film,
Wow.
Jason Schwartzman. So it's like, he took a chance on that guy, in a similar, he just saw something in him. He was like, this is the guy. Took a chance on him, just like someone took a chance on him and Owen and his buddies. So yeah. But yeah, getting more into, the film, one of the things I thought was really cool, that's kind of a little different for Wes, is he has such a wide scope in his mind for what the film is going to be, what it will look like, and even like what it'll sound like. I watched a short little like interview documentary kind of thing with Mark Mothersbaugh, who's done, he did the music for all of Wes's films so far. And he was talking about like Wes was literally like sitting in his couch in his little studio. They were talking, and Wes wasn't even done with the script yet, but he was already like working with him on the sounds that he wanted in the movie. And he was saying, typically how it works is they'll send you the film and they'll say, okay, this is what we're thinking. Can you score it? And here Wes is like sitting in his office, like not even done with the script yet. Already like, he already has in his mind, like, hey, like, let's start working on this score as I'm working on the script so that, they can be so in sync.
I feel like Wes and I are like the same person in that regard. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm gonna spend the time writing this, like the script for something, like I know how I want it to look, I know how I want it to sound. Like even nowadays, like, I'll hear a certain song and I'll start to think of like a scene that it could be used for, or if I have a scene in mind, like, so I feel like I'm the very same way, where it's like I think about like stories that I want to tell, and like all encompassing, like all the different layers to it.
Yeah.
Which can make it a little difficult when you're trying to work with other people that have their job to do too. But I definitely understand that aspect where Wes is coming from. Like he knows what he wants.
Exactly.
And the music in this movie specifically is like, it's like really fun.
It is. It's super fun. In fact, like I remember when I was watching it in my notes, when he's like, we put these rabbit ears in our helmets so we could pipe some music right into our helmets. And he starts like playing it, doing the little dance, and it's that beep, 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 beep. I just wrote in my notes, like, music and helmets, awesome.
Right. No, I think
just because I was like, oh, this is so fun.
Well, it's one of those movies where like there's not a lot of music in the movie, but when it does pop up, it's just a nice little like, like cherry on top of the scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just enough to spice it up just a little bit, and it's just really fun. A little elevator music-esque, but I think that's because of the specific instrument they use for it.
Yeah. He said, Mark Mothersbaugh said they basically like went in his basement and just like kind of played around on his, like, he has so many synths down there, and like Wes was like, yeah, I like this sound. No, not that one. Yeah, let's try this one. And Wes was like, I basically want kind of a cheap Casio kind of sound. And that's kind of what you get in the score. And even the way that Mark kind of like plays with that music. I think about specifically the scene where they're doing the raid to rescue his like financial guy from the pirates that kidnapped him. That kind of like James Bond-esque raid scene.
We gotta talk about it more in depth later,
yeah, we definitely will. But like the music there, if you're paying attention, you'll notice it starts off with that same little like sort of theme in the music with that electronic Casio sound as they're like getting off the boat. but like as they start across the bridge and really start getting going, it kind of changes to this like orchestral version of that same music with like strings and horns and woodwinds. Like it's a full like little orchestra playing it, and it just like it was really cool because I was like, oh wow, I noticed the change, and I noticed like I noticed it after it had already like affected me. Like it made me like kind of sit forward in my seat a little bit,
right?
Because it was the same thing. It was the same music, but it was being played in a more like grand way, which matches what's going on.
It starts to change like a almost like a war movie vibe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I thought that was really cool. Just how he has all that in his mind from the get go, and like the drawings, like I kind of shared last week on Royal Tenenbaums how him and his brother especially started illustrating everything for the movies. Like it was basically like you had your script and then you had your like drawings that Eric Chase Anderson had made, working on with Wes to like create what the look was going to be for the movie. And yeah, that's what happened with this one. Wes kind of talked about one of the things he always like did a bunch of drawings when he was little. And like, I know at least one of the drawings he did, he talks about having this like big tree. That's kind of that same idea of the boat in the movie, the set, where it's like a kind of like cutaway of this tree city with all those things going on inside of the tree. And so like, that was actually one of the first ideas that started. He started with like, I want a Jacques Cousteau like character, and I want this cross section view of a boat. And those are like two of the like foundational ideas for the film. And so like, yeah, this boat, this cross section boat, like is just this huge set. It's I want to say, I think it's like 150 feet long, and it is 40 feet tall, and it's literally like, it's just like you see in the film. Like, you know, when it kind of comes in on Bill Murray as Zissou, and he says he's kind of holding the model, and behind him you see the literal set, set of the movie, and and he says, let me tell you about my boat. And like, you get a tour of the boat with that crane shot, like coming, like going from room to room, like a dollhouse.
We have a sauna and keep a Swedish masseuse on staff.
Yes. It's incredible. Just the meta-ness of like having your actual set, like shown in the movie, like, and you know, it's a set, but like there's also like things taking place on the set as if you're inside of the boat for real. It's just really cool. But yeah, the boat, they actually bought two boats. So this is one reason the movie cost so much.
Oh gosh.
They bought two boats, which were like World War II-esque era boats. Wes said they might've been like World War II boats, or like maybe like right at the end of World War II sort of thing. They bought them in Cape Town, South Africa. And so they, I don't know why they were there, but that's where they got them. And so they had to bring these boats. This film was filmed, completely in Italy. So, it's his first film that wasn't like not in the US. It was completely filmed in Italy.
Right.
And so they had to take these boats all the way around Africa to get them up to the Mediterranean. And Wes even said at some point, like, it took forever. Like, they got there just in time. And actually, they didn't sorry, I'm confusing it a little bit. They didn't take both boats. They bought both boats. One was in decent, not very good condition, but they could, I don't know, drive it. Cause I don't know what term, sail it. It's not a sailboat. So I don't know what to say.
I mean, yeah.
They could boat the boat,
They could cruise.
Cruise. The other boat was not worth it, but they salvaged a ton of pieces of it. And so that was used on the set. So the pieces, they put the pieces of the unsalvageable boat onto the salvageable one. and took it up to Italy. And Wes said they even got delayed in Ivory Coast. He said he's not sure even what happened. He was like, yeah, they got held up in Ivory Coast. I don't know if they went into the port and they couldn't get out. He said they might have ended up in jail. They might have had to pay someone off. He said, I really don't know. So I don't know if he was like saying this is what happened, but I'm not going to say this is what happened. Or if he was saying like, these are things I heard, but I really don't know. It's just like interesting. Like,
right. Yeah. No, it's wild.
But yeah, they got stuck in Ivory Coast for a while and apparently maybe had to pay, some of probably the government,
I mean, listen,
to be able to get out of the port.
I have been to like Central America on mission trips a few times, and man, there's places around the world where things are a little rough, and when you're in a place where things are a little rough, things can happen. We once had we were trying to cross the border from Dominican Republic to Haiti, and the Dominican Republic officials like we had to gather everyone's passports. There's like 70 of us. Like it was a couple different groups on this trip, and they brought them to the office to like get them stamped or whatever. And then the officials were trying to like hold them hostage, basically.
Yeah.
So I mean, he may not know what happened, but I would not be surprised if all of those things are true.
Right.
It can get really crazy.
Absolutely. So basically, they got it there in the nick of time. They built this huge set. Kind of the cross section boat piece is like it's built like a set is normally built with wood, and then they got these pieces from the unsalvageable boat, and those are like a bunch of the stuff you see like in those rooms and on the boat like are actual like real pieces of the kind of twin boat. So
it's an awesome boat. It looks great.
It is. It's perfect. They got it there, they painted it, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so just really incredible. Like it's like, okay, I see why this movie cost $50 million. They had to buy these two boats and get the boat from Cape Town to Italy. That costs a lot of money.
All right, a lot of gas.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of other interesting things about this movie getting made. Obviously, like it's his first collaboration with Noah Baumbach as a co-writer. And really his first collaboration with him at all. I didn't really do any research into how they met, but I'm sure they just kind of were in similar circles and were like, hey, let's write something together. They have a similar, kind of style in the way they write, especially like dialogue. And so, I actually watched an interview in the Criterion Collection DVD. It was a Italian talk show they were on together, and it was actually like really funny because the talk show host would like ask them questions and they would like not really know how to take the question and just kind of like be really sarcastic with their answer. And it was interesting seeing like their dynamic together. But yeah, wrote it with Noah Baumbach. It's we'll talk a little bit more about like them working together a little bit later, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting things about this movie. Cate Blanchett, for instance,
she looks so young in this movie.
Yeah,
like I know this is after Lord of the Rings, obviously.
Right.
But like she looks like 10 years younger in this film than she did
does.
in Lord of the Rings, and it's
she does,
because I know she would have been. I mean, not saying this is old, but I know she had to have been like mid-30s probably when this movie was made. But she looks like she's like barely 20 in the movie.
Right. Yeah, she does look young, and it's funny. She gets on. She's like getting fitted for like her like prosthetics for looking pregnant and whatnot. And she actually like finds out after she's already like been cast and she's on set that she actually is pregnant. And so just one of those kind of funny things that happens on a movie set. Like, oh, I'm playing a pregnant person, and I actually am pregnant. Who knew? So it almost makes you wonder, like, if some of the scenes, like, she's able to like really dig into that.
Yeah, well,
acting.
I would imagine that depending on how far she was along when she found out, that at some point she may not have even needed the prosthetic. Like,
I don't think she was very far along.
Well, I feel like there's a scene where Steve walks in on her and Ned sharing a bed, like after a bunch of crazy stuff happens, and she doesn't look like she's wearing her prosthetic because like her bump is not as big. But so I imagine like that maybe it's a scene where,
I mean, maybe
she was kind of showing, but
it's hard to know like when they shoot what scenes,
right
on the timeline.
You never know, man. I've seen it all.
Yeah.
So, but that is an interesting little tidbit.
Yeah, but so and he's kind of growing his little ensemble of kind of actors and actresses that he works with regularly. So it's fun to see that. But so he shot this in a similar, with a similar camera, if not the same thing as Rushmore and Royal Tenenbaums. It's that wide, like that really widescreen CinemaScope camera. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's all kinds of different, formats, but I feel like, again, as someone who's like more of a casual fan of Wes Anderson, but I do like specific films of his. I feel like in my mind, he's always been associated with like 4:3, and everything's very everything happens exactly in the middle, right? Like especially like, and I feel like this is pretty popular. Like there's been a trend on social media right now where people are like doing like a parody of like a Wes Anderson thing. They're just doing like a random lunch and they do it like Wes Anderson, and a lot of it is like everything's perfectly centered, and I feel like people are really nailing the vibe of some of it. And so I thought
the music helps too,
and so that too. So I didn't, like, again, it's been a while since I've seen this movie, so I'm going back and watching it. I'm like, in my mind I'm thinking, it's going to be like a 4:3. So I was actually quite surprised at how wide of a format he used for it. And
and that's he does that. Yeah. He does it in all of his movies. Especially these first, not Bottle Rocket. He kind of had his hands tied. He wanted to, but he couldn't. But yeah, these first, the three after that, including this one, he uses that widescreen where it almost is even like distorted at the edges.
Yeah.
But so he uses this widescreen. It's the sort of like camera that you would normally see in like an action epic, or a very like historical film, where it's that really widescreen. It's not typically used for like comedic movies,
right?
But it works, and he I've talked about it in past episodes, but the way that the camera works in that specific like widescreen lens he uses is like you get all the depth of focus. Like it doesn't matter if someone's in the background, like you see them clear as day. And it's just so important. Like it gets more and more important to have that sort of lens, working with it as you get more and more Wes Anderson, because of all the detail like in the background.
I would imagine that they have to use a lot of light when they shoot a Wes Anderson movie, because one of the things that most impacts like your depth of field is your focal point of your lens, right? So I don't know how much but for the audience, like a camera lens, like it's like your eyeball iris, right? Where it has these blades inside, where if it's wide open, like the blades are all the way open, it's going to let in a lot of light. If it's not all the way open, it's going to let in a little bit of light. But that also affects like your depth of field. So like if something's like 1.5, like a little tiny adjustment of focus is going to make it jump. So for him to have a scene where there's like a lot of space between people, but everyone's in focus, he has to shoot in a way in which his lens is letting in less light, so the iris is more closed off, so there's not much of that difference between the different focal lengths, and that means there has to be like more light on set to compensate. Otherwise, everything will look darker. So,
Yeah,
it is interesting that he does that, because I mean, most people I know that are filmmakers, I mean, we all get really, really giddy when you have like super tight focus and you see all the beautiful distortion behind someone's head, and it's like so cool looking. And then Wes Anderson is like, yeah, I'm just going to show everything in focus.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's because he packs so much information. Like he talks about, we've talked in the past, like when he makes a movie, like the ideas, the ideas for his movie are just like, he has a list of information. And so like, and it all adds to the character, or it adds to, you know, the tone of the scene. So like, you know, you'll have a dialogue scene where like Bill Murray will be talking, or, you know, Steve will be talking to Ned, and, you know, he does that kind of like cut, dialogue cut where like it's the widescreen, but like the close up, it has, you know, Zissou on the left side, Ned on the right side. So when it cuts back and forth, there's kind of that symmetry in the edit. But like, so Zissou will be talking to Ned, and like you'll see Klaus, Willem Dafoe's character, in the background, and like because he's in focus, you know, Steve will say something to Ned that offends Klaus, and you'll see like Klaus like turn and look at him,
right?
And so like you get that, you're getting all that information because of that, you know, everyone being in focus.
It's
that
a lot
you
of
don't
visual
get
gags, yeah.
with, right.
You almost have to watch a Wes Anderson movie like twice. Like you got to watch it.
Yes.
You got to watch it the first time just to like have that first experience, listen to the story. And then it's like the second time you should almost watch it on mute and just pay attention to the visual gags, because there are a lot of little moments like that where like just on the edge of frame, something like that will happen.
Yeah. And it's all, it all like is character building, because that's what he cares about. Like if you watch any interviews at all with Wes, when they're like, you know, what, so like the Zissou character, you know, they're like, you know, is it supposed to be, you know, a projection of you, kind of like in the future of your career, like, kind of wondering like, oh, like am I going to become washed up like this guy? Am I going to like hit this wall like him, where I haven't made a good movie in 10 years? And he's like, well, obviously, like there's pieces of me, but there's pieces of this guy I know that is Zissou's age. There's these pieces of these other people. And he has all these, he draws from like all these people and ideas to make these characters, but then the characters kind of like take off. And like for this movie, in an interview, he kind of talked about how he didn't like the way the Zissou character started off, like isn't the way he ended at the end of the movie. Basically, like where he came to wasn't necessarily like how he envisioned the character when he started like developing the character. So like he's making the character and they're writing the script, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, this is just how this character has developed now. But yeah, so it's just interesting. Like he loves his characters, and I think it just reflects like the love he has for like people, which, you know, we're real characters. Like we're people, we're humans, we're not like in a story, but like we are in a sense in the story of the world, I guess. And so like, absolutely. And so like, but we all
characters than others, that's for sure.
Yes.
I mean, you hang around New Orleans long enough,
but
man, you definitely see some characters.
You know, even like Jeff Goldblum in an interview was talking about how like he I think I wrote down exactly like what he said. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But basically like just this idea of Wes, like really he said you can just tell like that Wes really appreciates people. So like just he said he he was basically saying the way he sees Wes like interact with the crew and the actors and everything, you can just tell like he appreciates not just like them working with him, but them as people. And you know, he said because of that, it really like brings something out of them. So like, it's this idea of like, man, he appreciates who people are as people. And because of the way he like interacts with them and treats them in that way, like it brings more out of them as an actor or as, you know, just a member of the crew. And I feel like it's similar with his characters in his films. Like he just appreciates these characters as like who he's thought of them, like whatever influences he's thought of them as, and it creates like, it makes them their own thing. And so like when people are like, oh, is it you or is it influenced by this? He's like, you know, yes, but more. Like this character became its own like person in a way, which is why like that contrast of like comedy and like emotion or like kind of artifice and like true, real, deep emotion like work. Whereas typically like those things can clash and kind of create like a weird tone in a movie that kind of takes you out of it, which it still does for some people. It's just so different. But like, I think the reason it works for a lot of people is just because, he does truly like appreciate these characters as characters, which I think is really cool and really like makes his movies, you know, unique, because he can make them with his, you know, very different style and still get a lot of emotion out of them.
Well, and I think, you know, not that I mean to pivot here, but
yeah,
when you're talking about things that he does that are unique, one of the things I really love about this movie, and I'm also thinking of a similar scene in Grand Budapest, is a couple of shootouts of this film.
Yeah,
they're actually really awesome. Like,
yes,
like I'm like they get your blood pumping. Like I love the way that they're shot, and I'm like, would it be weird if Wes Anderson made like a whole like action film, like a spy thriller? Like I think he still have to have some of that comedy because like it's you have to have that absurdity. But I'm like honestly, like low key, I'm like I kind of want a Wes Anderson like James Bond film.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever seen the original Casino Royale film from like the late 50s?
No, I haven't.
So prior to Dr. No, there actually, I think technically there were 2 adaptations of James Bond prior to Dr. No.
Okay.
There was like a TV movie made in America in the early 50s where James Bond was an FBI officer instead of a secret agent.
Gotcha.
I've never seen it. I'm sure it's not great. Mostly because like James Bond's British, right? And
right.
Anyway, he's American in that. And then actually technically the very first official James Bond adaptation is the original Casino Royale film. Let me double check and see if I can figure out when it came out. 1967. So maybe it's not prior to Dr. No. When did Dr. No come out?
Yeah, Dr. No was 50s.
Dr. No was 62. Never mind. Dr. No was 62. So it's not 62, prior to Dr. No. But the original Casino Royale, it's basically a parody film. It's an ensemble comedy. It stars David Nevin, famous comedian at the time, as the original James Bond. But literally the whole movie is a bunch of people pretending to be James Bond, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And I've only seen it once, but in my mind, I'm thinking like it feels very Wes Anderson-esque.
Yeah, in the tone, I guess.
Now, yeah, like just with it's just very witty, very like quick talking, snappy characters. A lot of like little random vignettes that happen, from what I remember. And so honestly, I'm like, I feel like I'd love to see like a full length like action film from Wes Anderson because the shootout on the boat and then the raid on the island, like it's like really silly and ridiculous, but it's also kind of awesome to watch too. Like I love, like there's that shot where, dude, when Steve like turns the corner and you see the table with all the pirates,
Yes.
and then the one guy points at him, and then like the camera, instead of like it's like Steve's protection looking this way, they look at him, and then the camera cuts to like the like looking straight onto the set, like on the false wall side, and it like does this zoom, this like pan from like the table. They're all shooting. You see sparks going off to where Steve is, and it's just such a great shot. I love it. It almost has like a martial arts film vibe to it, you know, where it's like all wide, you see everything happening.
Yeah.
And I was watching it, I'm like, man, like I think a Wes Anderson like proper spy film could be really, really fun. And I think he's kind of dabbled with that in some of his movies, like a little bit of like
almost
heist, you know, secret agent kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, so when I was doing research for Bottle Rocket, they actually like when they started writing it, they were like, oh, we're gonna make like a kind of like crime movie in a, you know, Mean Streets-esque like kind of like crime, maybe mob movie kind of thing. And they started writing and they were like, this isn't gonna work, this isn't our style. And so they still made a crime movie, but like in their like with their kind of style, with their voice and with their like personalities, which makes it like very funny and very like childlike and very and so it's almost like yeah, I guess you could like apply that to an action film, like, and it would probably turn out something like Bottle Rocket did as far as like a crime, you know, a crime mob movie sort of thing, like where you watch it and you're like, this is not a crime mob movie, but
right. I just think he has, I don't know, it's just something about like he's already such a unique filmmaker, and so then to see him have like this like really strong action scene like that, the whole raid sequence is like it's like really, really funny, but also it's just really well made.
Yeah, it's well executed for sure.
And so I don't know, and I know like I'm sure in the Grand Budapest Hotel episode you could talk about the shootout in that movie as well, the one that I can remember. But it's just, I don't know, it's just something I noticed where I was like, that's like the biggest thing that stuck out to me, especially because like the one on the boat, like all the sound cuts out, it's just music.
Yes.
And it almost makes you wonder, like, is this actually happening, or is this just in his mind? Because again, having not seen the movie in a long time, and when that scene started, I was like, I was trying to remember if like that actually happened or if he just imagined it, because like I could see it going either way, where it's like something he imagines himself doing and then just cuts to him like not actually doing it. But
that's not Wes's
context
style
of the movie, right? But seemingly in the context of the movie, like he actually does like this one man, you know, BA kind of run against all the pirates on his ship, and it's just a really interesting effect where all the sound cuts out and you just got that cheesy electro Casio music going. Also all the practical stuff going on is like really good too, like all the sparks and everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, like that one in particular, you know, it's, you know, you mentioned like you almost expect it to cut back to like, oh, none of this has actually really happened, which makes it even kind of like more funny and awesome that it doesn't at the same time. Like it's funnier that it doesn't cut back to that, because like what a cliche that would be. And Wes is like totally not into like doing things the cliche way. But also like it makes it more awesome. And I think part of it is, but even before the sound the sound cuts out and you just hear the score, there's this like thunderclap, that I noticed. Like, it's like, it's almost like in epiphany moment. It's something Wes does in his sound design. Like when there's an epiphany or when there's something like really epic about to happen, it's like the only time he adds in those like very like obvious like sound design elements where you get the thunderclap, which is a common thing he uses.
Well, also there's like a really, really quick little like montage, and it cuts to, I believe it cuts back to his face at the beginning of the movie where he comes out after his friend was killed by the jaguar shark. And so in that moment, it's almost like he's reminded of how helpless he felt in that moment, that he couldn't save his mentor.
Right.
And he's like, this is not happening again.
Right.
You know? And so that's kind of what, it's probably a mix of like anger, regret, grief, you know, also like just not wanting to feel helpless again. And like, that's what gives him the push to fight off the pirates. And it's like really, really quick, but it's a really nice moment.
Yeah. And I'm trying to find in my notes. I had written down something that I don't know. Somebody had said something about that scene that really stood out to me. And it was kind of just about like in that scene, it's almost as if Zissou, like Steve is like, it's almost as if he like has this moment where he's like, there's this moment where he has control, like he's a very controlling person, obviously, like everything that is happening as they're making the documentary, you know, he's like making adjustments and like, it's real life. It's happening, you know, even at some point he says like, it's a documentary. It's all really happening, like in an argument. But he is like making like director like adjustments to things like, hey, let's do like, did you get that shot when there's actually something real happening? Or he'll like say, okay, maybe you say that again, but say it a different way, sort of thing. And so there's I think there's a couple of elements going on. One of which is like, he's such a controlling person, like, and he's so out of control in this moment. He just like, it's like this moment where he's like, I have to get back in control. But yeah, that montage also, I think, points to just, he has a ton of rage inside of him because of the things he's experienced. You know, he's lost his mentor. He isn't like getting this woman that he's kind of interested in. Like his wife might be leaving him. Like he has, you know, he's lost somebody in the past too. He's not as successful as he used to be. You know, nobody really cares about him. And so it's like, it's all these things, like that kind of trigger this moment where like it brings out this rage in him that he has, under the surface the whole time, but all comes out in this moment. But he uses it in this moment, like to, you know, I guess like fight back against all those things. Like, it's almost as if, yes, he's like fighting the pirates off the boat, but like the rage that allows him to do that is like because of all these things he's experienced.
Right. Yeah. I think that's why there's that brief little cutaway to he's it's like the same exact shot of when he first comes out the wall. They're like, you've got the hydro whatever they call it, the hydrogen madness or whatever.
The crazy eyes. Like
crazy
he literally wore like these contacts that had like little spirals in them. For that scene. One of the little documentaries I watched like showed the costume person like taking them out of Bill's eyes, and it was pretty painful to watch.
Right.
Yeah, but sorry. It's there's a lot packed into this movie. You know, there's definitely, like I was talking about, he's a filmmaker. Like Steve Zissou is a filmmaker. He's a documentarian. And so, you know, it almost feels like there is a sense in which Wes, you know, in writing this character is like thinking about, okay, what would it look like if I become washed up? You know, what will it look like? What will I look like 20, 30 years down the road? What state will I be in, you know? And, you know, he said, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but also like he knows people that kind of are inspiring to him or that he's related to that are kind of in that state too that he drew from. So it's not just like him projecting himself, but also like drawing from people that he knows that are like in that place in life too, which is probably helpful for making the character such a good character.
I also wonder if he wrote the part with like Bill Murray in mind.
Yeah, he definitely did. He knew Bill Murray was going to play it.
There's a lot of that in Bill Murray as well, depending, like if you look at where he was in his career. You know, I mean, it had been a long time since he had really done anything notable. I also find it a little funny, like just some of the quirks of the character, Steve Zissou. Like he's kind of a dick. I mean, he really is, right? And if you know anything about Bill Murray in real life, he kind of is, and kind of like was at the time. He kind of is a bit of a pain to work with, and you know, from what I hear, especially on certain projects. So it's like I wonder how much of some of the aspects of the character was him acting. Like he's like very dry. He almost has like a feeling of boredom, you know, which I'm sure was intentional, because he's got all this stuff under the surface that he doesn't want to deal with, and I think it comes out in him kind of like, well, sure, yeah, we'll do that, you know, whatever you want. And so, but it's like I wonder how much of that was like it almost makes you wonder, like, did Wes kind of know about some of like Bill's personality quirks, and like he kind of included that in the character, or you know, what did Bill Murray bring to the table? I mean, it's a great character, and in the context of the movie, it really works. But it is a bit funny to me just to think like he doesn't really feel like he's acting, because like, it is Bill Murray's personality.
Wes kind of said like that Bill has this like underlying sadness that comes out when he's on camera that isn't necessarily like
a lot of comedians do.
He kind of, the way he said it made it seem like he's not necessarily saying like that's who Bill is, but just like when he's on camera, it's there. It's a reason like he was drawn to him. But yeah, it's funny, like face. It is, and
he's really good at like I don't know, his resting face, I think, has like a certain like
I guess
puppy dog eye-ness to it. You know?
But you know, Bill, from what I've seen in his working with Wes through these movies, I almost wonder, like, because I've seen some, like, I've watched some behind the scenes stuff for each of them. He's been in 3 of them, and I almost wonder if like his just sense of humor rubs some people the wrong way and make them say like he's difficult to work with, because like he does. Like you'll see him like being like really dry, and like for me, like I have a like, you know, not exactly the same, but a very similar sense of humor. So like to me, it's just like, oh, he's just being funny, like but like I could see how like some people would be like, oh, like Bill, like he's so like snooty and like.
Well, I think it also depends on who you're working with. Like, obviously, like if Bill and Wes have a good rapport, you know, it's different. I mean, sometimes he may be working on a project that he just doesn't believe in, but he either needs the money or he's doing a favor for somebody, you know, like that kind of stuff.
For sure.
And it makes him want to, you know, not really do his best. But also it's like, you know, maybe not so much anymore, but I think there was a time where he's like, I'm Bill Murray.
Right.
Like, you know,
Ghostbusters will do that to you.
I'm a big deal, right? Exactly. I mean, it's like to an extent, like you get it, because like, I mean, how many classic comedies can you name from the 80s and 90s that, you know, he was a part of, and you know, he is one of the reasons that makes so many of those films so notable. You know, and I think it's, you know, I think that people tend to forget like how easy it is for things like that to go to your head at a certain point. You know, to an extent. Again, nothing against Bill. I'm just like, I just find it funny that I feel like the way the character is portrayed in the film of Steve Zissou, like it feels like, oh yeah, like this was made for Bill Murray, because this seems to be like a little bit of like who Bill Murray is as a person, to an extent.
Yeah, and there is all that in the film. You know, there's even a scene where like he overhears some like people speaking in Italian and I guess understands them, and then like goes out and is pouting, is like, you know, they say they're just jealous, but it still hurts. And you know, there's a lot of that in the movie. It's almost like Wes in writing it, and I guess Baumbach too, as his co-writer, kind of, you know, seeing this character, you know, as a filmmaker, and you know, at this point in Wes's career, especially for him, you know, he's had a lot of success, and Royal Tenenbaums was almost like a reflection on like, what if I'm not the genius like they said I was? And then if he follows it up with this one, which is almost like, you know, what if all the things people say about me are true and I become washed up and unsuccessful 10 years from now?
Which is, it's really kind of like tragically ironic
Mm-hmm.
that this movie was a flop, and like
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest themes of the film.
Yeah, and it
but
didn't
I'm also
stop
really
him,
glad that I was gonna say I'm really glad that he didn't really take this film being a flop as an answer to that question.
right?
You know, because he's like, hey, I got more stories to tell. You know, hey, more power to him.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think of the scene where he's doing the interview with Blanchett's character, and you know, he's like making her tell him like what she didn't like about some recent documentaries, and she says, so like while they're doing the interview, there's this like orca in the background, like through the window porthole of the boat, like doing the almost like posing for the camera, like in that little window. And he finally gets her to say, and she's like, well, you know, I thought aspects of it were slightly fake. And
I love,
and there's an orca posing in the background.
Yeah, it's like hard to explain, but just, well, firstly, like Cate Blanchett's like accent for the character is like, it's just perfect.
Yeah,
like, it's like this very, very like posh, like kind of like British vibe.
Yeah, it's
and
just a little slight twist on her real accent.
Right. And so her delivery of that line specifically, it's like just the right amount of like silence goes by before she says it, and the way that she says it, she's like, I thought aspects of it seemed slightly fake. It's just perfect. Oh my gosh.
And
it really landed.
Yeah, the pause lets you like watch the orca like posing for the camera in the background, and it's like, yeah, that's definitely fake. You know,
right?
And so it's just like the irony and the comedy, but also like the real emotion of like, as a filmmaker, like Wes heard, like, probably, I'm sure, like he would hear or read that exact same comment about his films. Like one of the things that people said, like he's even talked about it in interviews, like as a like responding to questions, like, oh, this, you know, the way he makes movies really takes me like out of it. And Wes was like, well, that's the way I like it. Like, but just like him reflecting on it, and, you know, for the character to start off like with those sorts of, you know, Zissou really like gets upset, like when she says that, like he makes her say it and then he gets upset. And it's almost like, you know, Wes kind of like sees through this character. Like he gets to the point where like at the end of the movie, he's sitting with her and she's finally like published her article on him that she's been writing. And, you know, she's asking what he thought about it. And he kind of says like, I'm glad you wrote it the way you did and didn't like leave out the bad parts. He said, I wrote down the quote. He says something to the effect of, people are going to think I'm a showboat and a prick. He says, but, you know, that's me. I said those things. I did those things, and I can live with that. And it's like this progression of this character who's coming to terms with, one, who he is, which I think is a common theme throughout Wes's films, of characters coming to a point of acceptance of themselves and acceptance of others for who they are. So, you know, I think Zissou is a like prominent example of that. But yeah, you know, Zissou just reaches that point where he's just wrestling with that question of, am I ever going to be good again? You know, and I think that theme of legacy that we talked about, that's kind of, it's kind of unique a bit to this film and Wes's filmography. You know, the movie starts with his mentor, for years, that's mentored him, and been a huge advocate for him, like dying. He doesn't have that anymore. And so for all these years, and he's been successful, and for all these years, he hasn't needed to think about like, well, what happens when I'm gone, you know? And now all of a sudden, like, his mentor is gone, the person that like brought him up. And then all of a sudden this like son protege figure shows up in Ned, Owen Wilson's character. And all of a sudden, like, he's thinking about that idea of legacy. Like, you know, I don't think he had ever thought about, like, am I going to pass anything on? Like, am I going to pass like this? Cause he does, you can tell Zissou loves what he does. Like, you can tell he genuinely like thinks that he's bringing something, you know, in his documentaries that like makes the world a more if not like necessarily a better place, quote unquote, at least a more interesting place. Or, right. You know, so, he's never really thought about like, what happens when I'm gone? Is there going to be someone that can do this like behind me? And so, yeah, I think that that idea is interesting, you know?
Well, I think a lot of us have had that experience, you know. I mean, firstly, I think everyone, no matter if you're an artistic person or not, a creative person or not, no matter what you do, I think you have those moments where you crash and you burn. You think, man, am I ever going to be good again? Like, that's like a universal human thing.
Or was I ever, you know?
Right. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've sat down and I've said that to myself. Right. And then also legacy, I think for most people, especially if you're a bit younger in age, I think for most people, they don't really ask themselves questions about legacy until someone significant in their life passes away, especially if they're, you know, older, like a family member, a mentor, whatever, a friend. I think it's natural for, especially when it's a very sudden or very like tragic incident. I think it's very natural for that to be a point in time where you start asking yourselves those bigger questions about legacy, about, you know, about like, man, who's gonna like carry on my story when I'm no longer able to do it myself,
right?
You know?
Yeah, and there's there's that aspect too. It's so wide ranging. So there's that aspect to legacy, but there's also the aspect of grieving the legacy that was passed on to you, like Esteban, his mentor, who's played by Seymour Cassell in a bald cap, which that was funny to see him in the making of documentary, talking about like how much he hated wearing the bald cap. And when he was done, he was like, "Can I get this thing off?" But yeah, this is just a funny side note. But yeah, just that idea of like grieving when someone that has like passed this legacy onto you has moved on, has passed away. You know, at the beginning of the film, he's walking out of his premiere of his latest documentary. Shortly, you know, it's the part 1 of the jaguar shark, you know, where Esteban dies. The jaguar shark, which we haven't really brought up a whole lot, you know, kills Esteban in their expedition. He loses the footage of it. He doesn't have the footage of it, which I think is metaphorical in its own sense. Like, he lost the footage of that. It's almost like he doesn't know how to deal with it. It's kind of like the metaphor there.
Or he's like, he doesn't want to have to
face it. Sure. Yeah.
That part. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, he's walking out of the premiere and someone in the crowd of, you know, amidst the paparazzi says, you know, Hey, Steve, why are you at your premiere and not sitting Shiva for Esteban or whatever? And, you know, sitting Shiva is just, you know, the Jewish idea of, you know, grieving for 7 days when someone's passed on. And, you know, he fights this guy. He like gets in a tussle, with this guy.
Well, because then he said, because right after that he says, you know, when are you going to, like, who's the next crew member you're going to kill or something like
right.
that.
Exactly.
You know?
And so, yeah, so he's but he's at this point where like he's not grieving. He's kind of ignoring it, and he does kind of like pass through like the stages of grief as you go. He doesn't know how to deal with the grieving of the legacy that's been passed to him. But by the end of the film, like it's almost like he is sitting Shiva, because they're premiering part 2 of the Jaguar Shark. And where is Steve? He's not even in the premiere watching it. He's sitting outside reflecting. He's sitting on the steps outside the premiere reflecting. And it's almost as if he's finally come to a place where he can actually like grieve, the passing of his mentor, that legacy that was passed to him, grieve the person that passed it to him. But then like what happens? Klaus's nephew walks out, and like he just says, he hands him the Steve Zissou Society ring. This little kid that like, admired him, that you see in the beginning. And it's like, he's in a place where he can both at the same time, like grieve the person that passed the legacy onto him, and also like come to terms with like where he is in life and be ready to pass a legacy on to someone else. And this kid, like he looks at the kid and says, "Ho," and the kid says, "Ho," and then he puts them on his shoulders as they're like leaving the premiere. And there's the whole like scene at the end of the movie. It's really like, even me talking about it now, like reflecting on it, it actually like, it's more powerful now for me, I think, thinking about it in those terms than it was, I guess, watching it, which I can appreciate, that aspect of movie watching, of some things becoming more powerful after the effect. But I think that theme there is really, really powerful when you think about it.
Right. I think there's also an interesting aspect of like there's a component of bringing in someone new that you decided is going to be your protege can like cause an issue with other people.
Sure.
Who might think, because like the whole thing with Klaus, like I love that scene where he's like, Bill, Steve goes over and he's like, "Well, thanks for not picking me.
Yeah.
I'm always on B Squad." He's like, "Yeah, but you're leading B Squad."
Right.
We always thought of you as our little brother. He's like, "I always thought of you too as my dad's," you know? And so like, you see Klaus is like a character who like, so obviously wants to be the protege, even though like he's, physically speaking, not that much younger than Zissou,
maybe even older.
But I actually don't know.
I have no idea
how old each of the actors are, but obviously Willem Dafoe is like, a middle-aged man as well, even when this was shot. And I love him in this movie so much.
Yeah, he's so good.
But then, and then obviously eventually, he and Ned kind of have their, and I also love, like, as they're leaving the raid, there's that one scene where he tells them to hang back, and he's like, "Klaus, you're now A Squad." And he like, he just takes that so personally in the best way. And so there's a little bit of that aspect too, of like trying to balance between like bringing in someone new as a protege versus like also trying to still serve the rest of the community that's around you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like it's important too that it's Klaus's nephew, that's the one that he's like passing the ring to and like putting on his shoulders. Because Klaus is a bit too far down the line, but like Klaus is the one that introduces his nephew to him, is like, "Oh, my nephew loves you." Yeah, I think that's there. But yeah, let's wrap up thoughts on this with just talking about this jaguar shark. First of all, like, we haven't mentioned it, but Henry Selick does the stop motion for all these creatures, which all these creatures are, they're this, when Wes talks about it, he's like, yeah, we weren't like trying to make creatures that were like obviously fake, which they are obviously fake. But he said the idea wasn't, it's kind of a very different idea from something like Jurassic Park or something like the Avatar movies, where you're trying to make these creatures look like real life creatures. He was just going for an effect of like, I wanted them to look imaginary. which they do. And I think it's almost a sense of like, you know, when Steve encounters these animals or these creatures, like it's like viewing them through his eyes, through his like the way he sees the world, almost this imaginary, beautiful, interesting, unique place.
Right.
And you know, that's similar to like how Wes sees the world. But yeah, so you know, you have these Henry Selick stop motion animated creatures through the movie, and Henry Selick even said that he's pretty sure that jaguar shark is the largest ever stop motion puppet. So, and it is big. It was pretty big.
Maybe at the time, I don't know.
I was wondering. I was wondering
because I know that oh gosh, the people who did like Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings, like they've made some really big puppets for some of that stuff too.
Yeah, but that was that was about 5 years later, Coraline.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. Maybe at the time it might have been, but I'm not sure about.
Yeah, but the jaguar shark was big. It's definitely bigger than a person when I was watching it in the documentary, in the making of. But yeah, so you know, obviously this is something that Steve is going to confront. You know, you get this kind of revenge narrative of like, I'm going to confront this thing that killed my mentor. And so obviously when you have something like that, you're like, okay, well, what does the jaguar shark represent? What's the metaphor here? You know? And it's funny, in that Italian talk show interview, the host kind of brings that up, and Noah Baumbach says, you know, sometimes it's enough just to have a metaphor, you know, like kind of skirting the question. And then Wes is like, you know, we kind of see it as like a search for a metaphor. You know, they're very like, again, they were being very like funny and to me in that interview, but then in the interview in the Wes Anderson collection book, I wrote down this quote word for word that I'll read. Wes says, "I remember at a certain point while Noah and I were working on it, we had to ask, well, does it exist, this jaguar shark? And we decided, I guess it does. And then at the end, they go down into the ocean and they see it. We thought it should arrive and that it was going to stand for everything." Yeah, and that really stood out to me, because I was like, oh man, like it is this search for a metaphor. Like it is this search for like, what is this thing that I'm trying to face?
Ahab and Moby Dick, you know?
Yeah. And yet they talk about that, how like it's almost like a comic Moby Dick, but at the end, instead of fighting the beast, like the name's slipping my mind, the character in Moby Dick. Oh well.
Was Ahab.
Ahab, that's what. Ahab. Yeah, Captain Ahab. Instead of fighting the beast like Captain Ahab does, he looks at it like in the face. He stares at it, and then like kind of comes to the realization that like it was nothing personal. You know, and you know,
Matt being an animal.
Yeah, Matt Zoller Seitz, who is a friend of Wes and wrote the Wes Anderson collection book. In the interview that's in there, he brings up the Alcoholics Anonymous thing of, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And Wes kind of responds to that and says he's working towards getting to the last part especially. Yeah, and I thought that was really cool to think about like how this jaguar shark really does represent like everything all of these characters are facing. And that's why like they pack into this submarine. They've been on this journey. It is that sense of like, for one, like there's the sense of like, okay, this is like a meta kind of filmmaking thing going on. You have this crew that you've been working on to make this thing happen, and you're going to face the end and see, does it really exist the way we envisioned it was going to exist?
Yeah.
So you have that aspect going on. You also have this aspect of just like community, like we're in this together. You know, they put their hands on Steve as he's like, asking the question, really, like, does it remember me? I wonder if it remembers me. Like this grieving aspect of like grieving with a community, facing things in life with community. So there's like the filmmaking aspect, the like actual real life community aspect. And then there's just like, well, what is this thing that they're facing? The jaguar shark. I wrote down like just a list of all the things I thought it could represent. I don't know if you had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, I just think it is really beautiful that he has this community around him, and it's almost like a moment where he like gets a win. You know what I mean? He gets to be right, because honestly, I feel like if they never show the jaguar shark, I think there would have been more of a ambiguous, like did the mentor actually get killed by an animal, or did Steve actually kill the mentor, or did something else happen? Because in retrospect, that line from the one paparazzi guy at the beginning of the movie does feel a little out of place, being that there actually is a jaguar shark. So I wonder if that was like something they added to the story like late, and originally the plan was to have it a little more ambiguous.
Yeah.
But I think the jaguar shark just, I mean, in a lot of ways maybe just represents like inevitability.
Yeah.
It would be the inevitability of death, the inevitability of not being able to continue doing even things that you love, because you just get to a point where you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. But in a lot of ways, I think it just, it maybe represents Steve's his sense of wonder. It's like another creature that, like, yes, it did do this thing of like killing his mentor, but also it's like this very beautiful creature, and he gets to kind of have a moment where he just sits back and he just kind of appreciates it.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like the snow leopard scene in like a Secret Life of Walter Mitty, where Sean Penn's character says, sometimes I don't take the photo. I just want to sit here and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think, and also it's a very much reminds me of like a Steve Irwin kind of moment. Like, if any animal ever bit him, he'd always be like, oh, he didn't mean it. He's just being him. And I feel like if he had survived the stingray incident, R.I.P. Steve Irwin, that he probably would have had nothing against the stingray or stingrays in general. It's because he also had that kind of perspective of like, it was nothing personal. It's just an animal. It doesn't know any better.
Yeah.
And I think that, when it comes to people, like there is an aspect of that sometimes.
Yeah.
But also it's like, hopefully, we're not just animals. We can, be a bit better than them sometimes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like sometimes you have to remind yourself that it's like, maybe it wasn't personal. Maybe that's just who they are. Or
maybe,
be able to accept that.
Yeah. Or maybe like, obviously in this case, it's a beast. It's a shark like that just acts because that's what animals do. Like a shark, but maybe it was nothing personal, but like also maybe they had something going on too. And I think you see that in Steve's interactions with these people throughout the movie too. Like, the other characters, like they treat each other in certain ways. And they, at the end, it's funny. A lot of his movies end with this kind of like reconciliation, finding the characters instead of the other ways around. Like they end up reconciling just by, the inevitability of them being together, or like in proximity, and I think there's that aspect because like not long before they go down in the sub together, like they're all like out of whack, but they go down together. And there's this, this aspect of like finding reconciliation around this thing that you're facing. Knowing that like they all have these different things going on, and this jaguar shark almost represents all of those things for all of them. And they're facing all of their individual problems together. And there's this, common theme in his movies of acceptance. Like I was saying earlier, they're accepting like who they are, where they are in life. They're accepting each other for who they are. And so, yeah, I mean, the jaguar shark, it represents death and its inevitability. It represents like how life happens and you can't control everything, like Steve wants to. It represents that beauty. It's a beast, but it's also like beautiful in its own like kind of magical, imaginary way. It represents, the overwhelming feeling of expecting a baby. What am I going to do when this baby comes into the world? It represents, past traumas that these people have experienced. It represents, just the contrasts of what a beast of an animal is with like the personality, the personal nature of humanity. Like, I think there's that contrast there of like, yeah, he sees it and he's like, it's nothing personal, but we are personal. Like, we're in this boat together. There's that contrast there. And so like, yeah, we do need to reconcile. Like, you can't reconcile with a shark, but yeah, we do need to reconcile here in this sub together. Which brings you to like your need for others. Like, it represents like, the thing, the chaos that ensues after it kills Esteban, like culminates in, this representation of like your need for others wherever you are in life, whether you're on the top or at the bottom. You even see Hennessy's in the boat. Jeff Goldblum's character, like, he doesn't have like, he doesn't have the same issues as all these. He's pretty successful, but he still needs others. Like, even though he's kind of like at the top, he has his own issues, obviously. He's a prick in his own right, but
and honestly,
but they all need each other, right?
Yeah. On Hennessy, firstly, you gotta love Jeff Goldblum.
Oh yeah.
I really like that one little moment where towards the end, and he's like, hey, I need to talk to your ex-wife. And then Hennessy like pulls him aside. He's like, we never made great husbands, did we?
Yeah.
And it's almost like
connection.
Because they start the movie like hate each other's guts, basically.
Oh yeah.
Steve like literally goes and steals equipment from the guy. He's like, this guy's always overshadowing me. He's always taking all the funding that I'm trying to go after. He literally charges. He's like, before we go any further, I need you to sign this invoice, which is for the cost of the rescue, my time, and that of my crew. He's like, this is more than my entire budget.
Yeah.
But like, just that it's almost like, because they've kind of gone through that rescue raid together and everything, like, just for him to like take that step to try and like form a little bit of genuine connection with Zissou is like, it's a really sweet moment.
Yeah. And I think like the last thing I'll say about the jaguar shark is just the idea of him facing that thing, and not treating it the way like that Ahab treats Moby Dick, in the sense of like, and I think what that means is just, it goes back to he's a filmmaker, he's an artist, in a sense, like, I mean, not even in a sense, he is like, he creates these films. He's an artist. And just that idea that at the end of the day, like, as an artist, you're more interested in preserving things than conquering them or destroying them. And so at the end of the day, he faces this thing that the whole time he thinks, I'm going to kill this thing. But when he faces it, like, deep down, he can't change who he is. He's an artist. Like, I can't kill this thing. I can't conquer this thing. Like, I'm going to preserve it, not just like by letting it live, but by like capturing what it is on film. Like, Vikram is in there. Like, he's like, did you get the shot? Yeah, I got it.
Well, on that specifically, you also have to think it's almost like, the first time Zissou has to face the shark, essentially he has to face it alone, right? Even though Esteban was there, Esteban's killed,
right?
And then when he faces the shark the second time, he's surrounded by his community, and in some ways you can think of it, it's almost like, Wes Anderson has to walk through a difficult situation in life, and then he has to face it by himself the first time, metaphorically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he uses that as inspiration for something in his film, he gets to face that same scenario a second time, surrounded by a community of fellow artists.
Right.
So I think that's a really eloquent way to kind of tie it all together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's that's all I have for this one. I mean, I say that we could probably talk for forever about this, because there's just so much going on here that's really fun, and we didn't really talk about a lot about like how just funny this movie is. Like, I laughed out loud a lot. There's a lot of funny stuff going on.
Yeah, people love dry, witty humor. This is definitely one of those movies. It kind of reminds me of like one of my favorite comedies of all time is Clue, the movie from 1985, I think. Just because like that movie, it's like every 5 seconds somebody is like, and like in like all the comedies very verbal, and it's very quick. And this is the same kind of thing here, where like there's so many little moments, little jokes that just go by so quick. And like literally like someone will say something. Like there's like a scene where like he's talking to Eleanor, and he's like, I've never been big on apologies, so is it okay if I just skip it?
Yeah.
And she goes, okay. And he literally goes, but anyway, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's so
he starts
funny.
apologizing to her right after he just said, I'm not big on apologies.
I'm going to skip the apology.
And so just
but anyways, I'm sorry.
Like that. Yeah.
It's great. So what, I rate films and rank them and all that sort of stuff, even though it's kind of like a useless thing at the end of the day because of how subjective art is. But I like to share my ratings and my rankings. And so like, what would you rate this?
I first want to say I do as well, and it's nice that I feel like I have like a little group of people that like look forward to my ratings on this. But I also want to give you a shout out, because I'm fairly sure that you using Letterboxd more regularly inspired me to get more involved. With Letterboxd. I had an account for a while, and I would put stuff on there every now and then, but I really feel like it's been within the last 6 months to a year or so that I've really gotten into like everything that I watch. I'm giving it a rating. I might give it some kind of little review, even if sometimes it's just like a little joke that I want to make about it or something. Which there's tons.
It's something though.
There's so many things on Letterboxd where like people like just make like a 1-sentence joke about the movie, but
it preserves a memory too when you do that.
Right. No, for sure. So what do you do? Like a scale of like 5 stars, or like
you can do 5? You can do 5 stars or out of 10, whatever you want to do.
Well, we're talking about Letterboxd. We'll do stars.
Sounds good.
It's a 5-star rating. I'd give this a solid 3. I feel like I feel like maybe if I watched it again, it's one of those movies I feel like I probably like a little bit more every time I watch it. But I definitely feel like I've seen other Wes Anderson movies that like I enjoy a lot more. So I'd give it a solid 3. I think it's a good watch. It's a fun time. A lot of really great performances, but I think Wes Anderson as a filmmaker has done stuff that's better and definitely more entertaining to watch.
For sure. And I agree. I think this is up there for me as far as his movies go, just because I think, for one, like I really, really appreciate his art form. And I think this is like one of the most like personal and just like crafted to, I think part of it is just having such a big budget is like he was able to do it so much like he wanted to. So I just really appreciate this one. It's so I think for me, like Royal Tenenbaums was one on last episode I talked about. It kind of moved up a little bit for me. I had it at a 4.5 and I moved it up to a 5 just because it affected me emotionally so heavily on this watch through. And I think that is part of just watching his movies over again. You kind of are able to like get through some of the weeds and really get to the core of it.
I also think depending on what season in life you might.
I think that's part of it too. I have kids now, so for some reason, when you have kids, you just cry even more. Like I already cried in movies, and then like I had kids, and now I cry like all the time in movies. I don't know what the deal is with that, but you know, maybe you'll have that one day to look forward to. But this for me is a 4.5. It didn't move up on this watch for me like Royal Tenenbaums does, and I think because like one of the things that I do when rating is so subjective, it means nothing at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Like, so like I'm talking with you, I'm thinking like, oh, he's going to give it at least like 4 stars. And then you give it 3. And it's just like, we all have our ways that we do ratings. And part of the way that I rate is just like, how it makes me feel like watching it. It has a huge part to play for me. And so like, this one would be a 5-star for me if it wasn't for the fact that like I just feel like some of the way it's made just makes it harder to like feel the emotion in the moment. And like Royal Tenenbaums at the end, like it like broke me with one of the lines. You haven't seen it, right?
I have not actually.
Yeah. So like you'll know the line that I'm talking about, like when you eventually watch it. Like there's a line that Ben Stiller delivers that just like breaks me. Or it did this time. And so they're just like, I felt the emotion of the submarine jaguar shark encounter scene. But it just didn't affect me to the same level. So like I just can't bump it up that high. But yeah, this is a 4.5 star for me, and I probably am like too optimistic sometimes when I rate movies. Also, like I
feel like by the end of this, every Wes Anderson movie is going to be like a 4.5.
That's part of it. Is like I'm doing so much research, and like I already loved Wes Anderson as a director, and this is making me like love it so much more. But yeah, so I think I have it ranked as of now. Watching back through these again. I think I have it ranked at 5, 4 or 5. It's kind of in that range for me. That kind of like
out of all of his films.
Yeah, out of the 10 he has so far, like that upper middle kind of range for me. So yeah,
I'd say that's fair considering that most of them, at least half of them, I haven't seen. So I feel like it'd probably be about that same spot, to be honest.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to be covering the Darjeeling Limited. So everyone has that to look forward to for next week. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do our movie news and movie draft segments. And so that's going to be a fun time. So we will see you in a few minutes.
Woo-hoo!
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and we hope you'll stick around for the segments we have coming up after this quick break. But during this break, I wanted to tell you how you can get more involved with the Establishing Shot podcast. There are several ways you can do this. The main way you can do it is by going to establishingshotpod.com, our website where you can find all sorts of information like episodes with the show notes on there, information about our guests for each episode. You can find reviews there. And there's a page where you can actually leave a review on the website if you want to. You can see all the platforms where the podcast is available, like Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast platforms, and even a link to our YouTube page where you can see a video version of the podcast. So please go to the website. And the place I want to highlight there is our donate page, which has information about our Establishing Shot family. This is a way that you can subscribe to the podcast to support all the efforts and the stuff that goes into making this podcast good and making it better than it even is now. We have different tiers that you can subscribe to, starting at $5. And what this will do is you'll be able to support the podcast, help me make it better. And also at the same time, you'll get early and ad-free episodes. You'll get access to our Discord server where you can join in and just kind of talking about movies with a community that loves film. And so we would love to have you in there. And then the higher up in the tiers you go, the more you get. Even things like chats and video chats that we'll do every once in a while, where we get to talk about in more detail stuff that we're talking about on the podcast. So I hope you'll subscribe to that. Choose a tier that fits your budget, and I would love for you to support the podcast in that way. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is where you can find us on social media. You can find me personally on Twitter at @TheEliPrice, and you can also follow me on Letterboxd. Letterboxd is kind of like a social media for movie reviews, so you can read my reviews there, and you can find me there at just Eli Price. No spaces or anything. So I'm on Twitter and Letterboxd. You can find the podcast on all the social platforms as well, such as Twitter at eShotPod, and then on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at Establishing Shot Pod. So make sure to follow us so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments about the episode or about the podcast, you can always email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com. And the very last thing I want to do before you get back into the episode today is just ask you to please go to Spotify and Apple and leave some ratings and reviews. That really helps the visibility of the podcast and gets it in more people's podcast feeds. And so we hope you will do that for us, and we would greatly appreciate it. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode, and I will see you next time on the Establishing Shot podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Thank you for sticking around with me and JP. Had a lot of fun in the first segment talking really in depth about the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. But yeah, we're going to jump into our movie news segment. So
kind of news.
Yeah, I still don't have, I think an episode or two, I was like, man, I really need to get a little news drop in the soundboard, like kind of like a
movie news.
Yeah.
There you go.
There we go. I might cut that out and use it. Who knows? Who knows if I find the time. But yeah, so for movie news, when this episode releases, that same weekend will be the release weekend for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So I figured we kind of talk about
part
that.
One, right?
Huh? Part one?
Part one of two.
So it's a two-parter. So I know the third one that they have on the slate has a different name. I think it's like Beyond the Spider-Verse or something like that.
Oh, okay. I guess previously this was marketed. I heard it was like a part one, and like the third film's going to be a direct follow-up to this.
Yeah. And I'm sure it will be, like, because Into the Spider-Verse leads into this, which is Across the Spider-Verse, and then I guess after that you have to go Beyond the Spider-Verse. But yeah, that's what it says in Letterboxd anyways. Like if you scroll to the bottom of like, where it shows you like sequels or whatever, it has Beyond the Spider-Verse. But yeah, but maybe it wasn't originally marketed that way. But yeah, so that's coming out this same weekend that this is releasing. So I figured we kind of talk about like, are we excited for that? And then just like Spider-Man adaptations in general, like what, how has that been for you? And, what do you see moving forward with Spider-Man?
Man, I would say I am excited for it. It does look cool.
Yeah.
But I will be honest with you, I have still not got around to seeing the Into the Spider-Verse.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Film. Just one of those things where it's like it kind of came out and I never had a chance to see it, and I'm sure it's on like Disney Plus or something now, and I just haven't gone around to it. Yeah.
Well, I'll say
this. I'm not like the craziest Spider-Man fan.
Okay.
So it's like, I know some people that that's their favorite superhero. They have to watch anything to do with Spider-Man. He's cool. There's other ones that I like way more. So,
What's an example?
It wasn't
Who's your guy?
You got
or girl.
Batman.
Sure.
Batman.
Yeah,
love Batman. So you got the Justice League back there. Love
Yes.
Martian Manhunter's pretty dope. The Marvel side, really love Daredevil and the Punisher. Actually, I really
Okay,
like as
yeah.
well.
So like on the Marvel side, the violent are the better, basically.
Kind of. I mean, and honestly, like I have really fond memories of like the Punisher film with Thomas Jane.
Yeah.
From like 2005. I still think it's actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
The Daredevil series that Netflix did specifically though made me fall in love with that character.
Okay, yeah.
I'd love to do like maybe whenever I get my show started, I'll have you on. We could do like a deep dive into that series specifically, and like especially a lot of like the like religious undertones. Like it's so good, so good. But anyway,
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, it looks really cool. I love the art style. I also love that it's pushed like the animation medium to where you have more movies coming out that are like going for more of a unique feel.
Mm-hmm. I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles preview that looked like it was
so cool.
Yeah, it looked like it was
so
a similar
awesome.
animation style.
Yeah, I really love this new animation style of like it's kind of stop motion ish inspired, but also like what I liked about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one is that it has like a hand painted feel to it, to the art style.
Yeah. So do you know the story behind the animation for the first Into the Spider-Verse, like the first one?
I do know about the fact that Miles' frame rate progresses throughout the film.
Okay.
I've heard.
I didn't even know that. But
so like when he first starts out and he's like very, he's like a novice.
Yeah.
His like the film's like 24 frames a second, and I think they actually animated him at like 12 frames a second.
Okay.
So when he first starts out being Spider-Man, he's a little
like choppy.
He's a little choppier, and then as the film progresses and he like comes under the tutelage of like Peter Parker, he starts like literally and metaphorically smoothing out.
Yeah. That's cool. I didn't even know that. But yeah, when you said that, now that you say that though, I can just from memory, I can see that. But yeah, so they actually, they started animating this, basically like animation studios,
like Pixar ripoff.
Yeah. They kind of, there's like a few big animation studios and they kind of have this like template that they start with as far as like, obviously you're doing a lot of like coding when you're making like animation software. Mm-hmm. And so like they started making this movie. I don't know how far they got into it before they were like, this is not how we want it to look. We can't get it to look like we want it to look with these, resources we have available, these like animation software templates we have to use. And so they basically like started from scratch as far as that goes. So like, so they were like, if we're going to get this movie to look the way we want it to, we've got to start completely from scratch. And so they made a whole new, like, I'm probably not even using the correct terms, like, but the way that it makes sense for me is like an animation template.
I think that's a fair term. Or you're probably getting a little more into like the algorithmic kind of stuff.
But yeah,
it's all ones and zeros at the end of the day.
They created their own thing to make it have that comic book feel, because it does. You can even see like the little comic book dots like in the characters' faces and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah,
and it even cool. The way it moves like feels like you're going frame to frame in a comic book, which is really cool.
Which is one of those things like only animation can do that.
Yes.
And then you've seen movies like the Mitchells versus the Machines. You've seen like the Bad Guys, another like DreamWorks film. Even the most recent Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which I've heard is like fantastic.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many people I've seen the reviews are like, this movie has no right to be as good as it is. But like all these, it's just really cool to see more animations studios like embracing pushing the medium instead of just making something very like Pixar or like Disney animation-esque, which
nothing
like,
against those, but
no, like those films. I mean, like WALL-E's a beautiful movie, like, but it's like they were like the big dogs and everyone kind of tries to copy that style. Right. It's just nice to see like people branching out.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sure Disney eventually will try and venture it. Well, technically, I guess this would be a Disney movie because it's owned by
Well, it's
Fox owns them, so.
It is. It's the Sony. It's the Sony branch of Spider-Man.
Right.
But I think so. Yeah, I don't know that Disney sees anything from this.
It's complicated.
It is very complicated. But yeah, so like Disney has some sort of rights to Spider-Man, but I think when Sony makes a Spider-Man movie, it seems like they're the official owners. So I would think Disney doesn't really have anything to do with it. But I could be wrong.
Thinking of 20th Century Fox is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, but Disney might own all of it. Who knows?
I'm sure they will someday.
But yeah, so if it's any encouragement to see the first one, I think it's the best Spider-Man movie. That might be a hot take. I don't know. I have no idea, but I think it's the best Spider-Man movie ever.
I've heard a lot of people say that, and they've also said it's one of the best animated movies ever made. I mean, I've wanted to see it. I just haven't had a chance to get around to it. But
well, maybe this will be your chance.
Yeah,
catch up with it and see the new one.
My favorite adaptation. I mean, I grew up with Tobey Maguire. Man. Yeah, I gotta stand by my boy. I love the Sam Raimi films, specifically Spider-Man 2, one of the greats.
I agree.
I really enjoyed No Way Home. Like I saw that. I still haven't seen Homecoming, but I did see Far From Home in theaters when that came out with my friends. Like all my friends over here in New Orleans are like a bunch of like MCU freaks. So so every Marvel movie that comes out, some of the DC movies too, like we go and see them together, but comic book stuff. But I really enjoyed No Way Home. I think at the time I was like, this is like a 9 out of 10. It's amazing. All the crowd moments like were great. Especially seeing Willem Dafoe back as Goblin, like he was like brutal in that movie. Like that fight scene they have right after right after he kills Aunt May, where he like picks up Spider-Man and like power bombs him through the floor. Oh gosh, the sound design during that scene.
Dafoe plays that so well.
The sound design during that scene was just brutal. Like you just felt those hits. So shout out to the Foley team on that movie. But I think like the nostalgia factor has kind of been removed.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I like it as much.
It's solid. I
want to go back. Because again, not being like a super Spider-Man fanatic, I do want to go back. I still haven't gotten around to watching the Amazing Spider-Man films either, because I do think that the best part of No Way Home was seeing Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. He just is great as I love character.
Andrew Garfield. Yeah.
And I think I've really gotten into him because of some of the other movies he's done.
Right.
My friends who are really into Spider-Man and Marvel a lot more than me, all say that he is the best, like Peter Parker / Spider-Man.
Okay.
Supposedly that's their opinion, is that, and I'm like, I get it. Like, I think he nails like the smart guy antics of Peter Parker. He nails like the sarcasm of Spider-Man.
Yeah. My thing with Andrew Garfield is he's not quite nerdy enough. Like he's kind of got that like subtle, like handsome guy look that kind of is like, man, he needs to nerd it up a little bit more for me to believe he's Spider-Man.
I get that. But I've also seen people defending the fact that like in some of like the early comics, like he was never like Peter Parker in the comics, it wasn't necessarily like unpopular.
Yeah, sure.
Like, he was nerdy, but he wasn't like a social outcast. Like I think like Tobey Maguire, obviously his portrayal was like much, and I do think he nails the nerdiness a lot better. But but I do think that based on some of the stuff I've seen from Andrew Garfield's like quippiness as Spider-Man, I think he nails that aspect of it a lot better. I think most people would say Tobey might be a better Peter, but Andrew Garfield's a better Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and then people think Tom Holland's a good combination of the two.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard for me to really pick a favorite, but I just got to say I grew up with Tobey, so I got to stand by Tobey.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 are just like they're so good. I think Spider-Man 2 is actually like the best of I think it would be after Into the Spider-Verse. I think that would be my next favorite. And I don't know. I feel like if you ask like 100 people, you'd probably get 50 that said Spider-Man and 50 that said Spider-Man 2 if it was the choice between those two. But yeah, it's
both just
those are just so
solid.
Yeah, they're so good. That Sam Raimi style, like the voice like and elements that he brings to it, I think are just so good. And they make it interesting, not just like, you know, the Marvel movies have like this template or this kind of like, I don't know, there's a staleness to it that I think the only reason I really actually enjoyed No Way Home was because it brought back people from the other series.
I don't know. I think
it's like there. So I'll say this: like I like what I liked about the ending of it was just like, you know, and spoiler alerts, but it's been out long enough. You know, you should have seen it. Just the fact that like nobody knows him anymore, and he can actually be Spider-Man again. Where like, where I think like the reason I hated Homecoming and even like Far From Home is it made him too much of like this MCU character, and so he wasn't really Spider-Man, because like Spider-Man is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like he's he's just like, he's a normal dude. He's not anything super important, and he's
able to climb up a wall.
And
shoot webs.
And he's just trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean for me as this kid to have these powers? What, you know, it's this responsibility thing. What are my and so that you didn't get that with Homecoming and Far From Home, because he's just thrust into this MCU world. He has this like surrogate Tony Stark father figure, which I hated. And then so finally, like in this one, like at the end, you get the sense of like, oh, like maybe in the future we'll actually get to experience Spider-Man how you're supposed to be introduced to him.
Yeah, so, well, I did really like Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio in Far From Home. But I think that's the big thing with No Way Home is, and I told this to my friends and they laughed at me. They thought it was so silly that I was saying this, but I'm like, this movie's about him becoming Spider-Man, not Iron Boy, you know, as some people would call him.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight, like again, I haven't really seen the movie since probably I went and saw it in the theater, but I mean, I very strongly remember it. I think the second half of the movie after Aunt May dies is like much stronger than the first kind of like MacGuffin with like the portal and stuff.
Yeah.
But and I think like, you know, in hindsight, there's also like a lot of holes you can kind of poke in the whole setup. But to have, I mean, Alfred Molina back as Doc Ock is phenomenal. To have Willem Dafoe back was great. And I think the whole sequence where Aunt May dies and there's a shot of him like on the roof, like crying in the rain, like it's like really beautiful, and it's like really it was nice to have that kind of emotional moment. I do agree though, like the MCU can be very formulaic, and it's interesting how like when you look back at it, you look at the films that broke the mold, and then every other movie that followed up like had to be that.
Right.
So it's like, I think of like Guardians is like the first one I can think of in my mind that was very comedy centric.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like all the other movies before that like had some jokes, but Guardians was like definitely the one that was like the most like comedy central.
Sure, yeah.
And then every movie since then, and it was like the first movie where like all the main cast all kind of have their quips.
Yeah.
And then every movie since then, everybody's got to be the jokester, and it's, you know, it gets really aggravating after a while.
Sure.
Although we'll say Volume 3 was phenomenal, but we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
I loved it. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, but I think we mostly agree as far as like which Spider-Man adaptations are good or not. But you just need to go see Into the Spider-Verse.
I know.
That's what you need to do.
I will watch it soon, I promise, and I'll let you know what I
thought. But yeah, so yeah, I'm excited about Across the Spider-Verse. I'm sure when this episode releases, I will be making my way to theaters to see that, because
making your way downtown.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
If there was a movie theater downtown.
If there was.
You're gonna open one.
Yeah. If there was one that we could open that would show it downtown, I'll run it. Someone just pay to make it happen, and I'll get the movies.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So that's all I really had for that. It's fun to talk about Spider-Man and the adaptations. I think he is my favorite MCU character. Like, not I say MCU, my favorite just Marvel character in general. I'm a DC guy, so like Flash is my favorite comic book character. And then Batman is a very, 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 very close second. But I just like, as far as like the characters and the storylines, I prefer DC. So I haven't read a lot of Marvel comics. I've read an okay amount of DC stuff. But yeah, obviously like DC hasn't made a ton of good movies, but there's some really good ones at the same time. But anyways,
live the Snyderverse.
Yeah. That's enough on the superheroes. We're gonna move now into our movie draft.
All right,
segment.
I'm ready. I spent like half an hour putting together a list.
Yes, I love it.
Because I was like, I want to have some ready to go that aren't like the popular ones, just in case.
Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting one. I think this is going to be the most like strange one we've done so far. The other ones have been pretty like typical. So, but yeah, so today, just kind of along the same theme as covering the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, we're going to do a draft of movies with significant scenes that occur underwater. So it can be a movie that's completely or mostly or a lot underwater, or it can be a movie where there's just a sequence that's, means something significant that happens underwater, or anything in between. So that's kind of what we're drafting. I don't want to give any examples because, we might give away things that we want to draft, but you'll pick up on what we're putting down once we get going. So JP, you're the guest, so I'm going to let you pick first. This always comes back to bite me, but
Man, do I need to like give a little explanation after
a quick one?
Let people know what it's about. All right. I'm just gonna say you may like the ones that I really want to choose from. If you don't choose from, there's gonna be a bit of a theme here.
Okay, I like it.
But my first choice is gonna be the movie Underwater from 2020.
Nice.
Starring Kristen Stewart and a bunch of other people.
I never saw that.
They are researchers on like this like deep sea research facility, and chaos ensues. It's a little monster action. It's a good time. It's a good time. It's like one of those movies where like, I expected it to be like okay, but it actually was like pretty good. It's a fun movie. Highly recommend.
Yeah. So I'm envisioning like a lot of like intense, like kind of like clench your butt cheeks sequences where there's something happening, but because you're underwater, it's like super stressful.
Well, yeah, like it's it's a little sci-fi-esque because there's like a sequence where they have to like cross the ocean floor in these suits.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's pitch black, so as you could imagine, it's definitely got some clenching of the cheeks.
Yeah, and I like Kristen Stewart. She gets a bad rap, I think, sometimes from Twilight, but she's a good actress.
So does Robert Pattinson. Like people don't understand that he's actually like a phenomenal actor.
Oh yeah.
So to go watch Good Time by the Safdie brothers and then come back.
Yes. I would say go watch The Lighthouse, but that's kind of like if you dare. Go watch The Lighthouse if you dare. It's intense.
It's a rough one.
Yeah. But so I'm coming in and I have a list of movies, but I don't have them like in any sort of order. And so I'm coming in like, man, what do I need to pick first? But I'm going to start off just like, I don't know if this is something you're familiar with or interested in. Typically I try to, you want to try to draft things so that the other person doesn't get them. But I'm going to go completely like off the wall here, and I'm going to make my first pick, Ponyo, which is, it's Hayao Miyazaki film, Japanese, it's an anime movie, in a sense, in the sense that it's a Japanese animated film. But yeah, Miyazaki, movies like Spirited Away and My Neighbor Totoro, which are great. But Ponyo, I love Ponyo. And I think the reason I'm choosing it here is just because I love the way he animates the ocean. It gives you a similar like magical vibe that the underwater scenes in Steve Zissou give. Like it's just, when you go underwater in that movie, and to give people a reference point, it's almost like, it's kind of like a Little Mermaid-esque kind of story where you have this character Ponyo who's a fish and becomes a human and befriends like a human kid, like they're both kids, and it's Little Mermaid-esque in that way, not in the it's not the typical Little Mermaid story, but it has those vibes to it. But yeah, so it just, the way he animates the underwater scenes, just like when I saw this movie and we went underwater, I was just smiling because it was so fun and it was so like interesting to look at. And yeah, so I'm going with Ponyo. Okay. Great movie. Okay. And you can watch it with subtitles in Japanese, or you can watch all these Miyazaki movies are dubbed too. And the dubs are generally actually pretty decent dubbed films. So
yeah, my rule is if I'm watching live action, I'll watch it subbed, at least for the first time. If I'm watching animated, I'll watch it dubbed.
Yeah.
And it's a very hot take, but dub over sub every day.
Yeah, and I would even recommend, like, if you're getting into like Miyazaki animated movies for the first time, like, because the dubs are actually pretty good generally, and his movies are so visually stunning, I would recommend like going dub so you can pay attention to what's going on the screen more. Yeah, but yeah, Ponyo is my first choice.
Okay,
and we're gonna draft 5 each, by the way, for the listeners. Okay. We already know that.
So my second pick again, because this is like, I want to like, because I'm approaching this as like movies that I actually like have seen, I really enjoy.
Yeah,
I'm not really worried about like who the viewers are going to think has the better team, so to speak.
Yeah.
Number 2 for me is going to be The Cave from 2005.
I don't even think I know this movie.
So this is a movie I saw like forever ago, and I recently rewatched it, and I was like, surprisingly, I still love it. It's about a group of cave divers that find this cave underneath this like old like church chapel, and they go down, and chaos ensues. A little bit of monster action.
Okay, so it's like a horror thriller kind of movie.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like PG-13, so it's not too crazy. And I feel like it's got a bit of a higher budget. It's one of those movies where I actually was looking it up. The director, it's the only movie they've ever made, because it was like a critical and commercial failure. But as a fan of monster movies, it's a good time.
Okay,
it's a good time.
And they go underwater, I assume, in this cave.
Yeah, they're cave. Sorry, they're like they're like, there's a lot of scenes of them like in the water, or the fact that they're inside of this cave network, has lots of play into it. I will say it was hard to like, I'm like, does it have to be on underwater or on the water? Does that count? But I'm trying to stick to underwater. So there's a lot of
definitely it has to be underwater at some point.
They have to there's a lot of sequences in like diving, inside of the cave. So
that works. Okay. Well, I'm going to go with a movie. My second pick. I have some other ones that I probably like more than this, but I'm going to go ahead and pick this one because I really like the scene that's underwater. And it's funny, you mentioned the original version of this earlier, Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig version. I can't remember the year it released, but it's the most recent, 2006, most recent Bond series with Daniel Craig. It's the first one, and the reason I'm picking this one is because, spoiler alert, if you I'm not giving
It's been
spoiler
out since
alerts
2006, y'all.
every time I spoil a movie.
You can't give a spoiler alert for a movie that's like over a decade old.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you haven't seen it, that's on you.
It's on you. But there's a scene at the very end. The reason I love it is because it's the first time you get every other introduction to every other Bond. He's just like suave, does everything well, like, you know, he's just in charge.
Always saves the day, always gets the girl.
And yeah, always saves the day, always gets the girl. And in this one, you have that scene at the end where he's underwater. He's trying to save the girl. She's stuck in a cage underwater, and he can't save the girl. And the response is just like this purely vulnerable emotion of like, just like despair and rage that you get from Daniel Craig underwater. And it's just an introduction to Bond that I thought was like, I'm not a huge fan of Bond in general. Like I've watched the old ones and they just don't do it for me, but the Craig series I love. And I think part of it is just because you get such a vulnerable introduction to him in this film, and it all culminates in that underwater scene.
Also, him. she lets herself drown too. Like that's the other part of it too. It's just all around. That's a phenomenal scene.
Yeah. So I'm going Casino Royale for that scene. Yeah.
Man. All right. Number 3. Gonna go with Deep Blue Sea, 1999.
I think it's another one I don't know.
You've never seen Deep Blue Sea?
I don't think so.
Oh, dude, it's a classic. Thomas Jane is in it. LL Cool J.
Okay.
Samuel Jackson. Very infamous scene of Samuel Jackson getting killed by a horrifically CGI rendered shark. It is 1999.
Yeah, I'm seeing your running theme with these monsters.
Hey, look, I told you I love monster movies. What can I say? This one they have this kind of ocean research facility, and they are trying to create a cure for Alzheimer's, which they are doing by injecting certain things into these mako sharks.
Yeah,
and they're basically using the mako shark brain to like test the chemical, but it causes them to become hyper intelligent. And some things happen, and they end up basically being able to get into the facility, and it slowly starts filling up with water. And you got like 3 hyper intelligent, genetically modified mako sharks and a bunch of people, and chaos ensues. So it's great. It is such a. I'll give you one really fun fact about it is that there is a character in the movie, like the lead female scientist, who her character name and actress name is I can't remember right now, but originally this character survives the movie, and test audiences hated this character so much. Every single comment was like, "You need to kill her. Like, why does she live?" They had some more colorful things to say that I'm not going to say here.
Yeah.
And so they actually reshot like the ending to like allow her to die because everyone felt so strongly about it.
That's awesome.
And when you watch the movie, you'll get a sense of why. But yeah, it's just a fun time. It's just a great like classic 90s monster film. So yeah.
I dig it. That's awesome. So I'm going with this one. The reason I'm going with this movie is there's only like one small little like part where they're underwater that I can think of. But it was my favorite movie last year, and I just loved it so much. So I wanted to take this chance to highlight it. It's After Sun. It's a movie. It actually got Paul Mescal got nominated for supporting actor.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. I haven't gone around and seen it.
It's a first feature film by a director named Charlotte Wells. It's great. It's kind of like this. It's about this girl and her dad on this vacation, and it's you kind of realize like fairly early on that you're kind of seeing it. It's a memory. Like it's her older, and she's thinking back and watching these old tapes, like home video tapes of her and her dad on this, like kind of like a vacation where they last like had a strong relationship. You get the sense of, and her kind of reflecting on that and what it means. And there's this scene where they're underwater. You see them and they have those underwater cameras. Kids these days, I don't know if they are going to understand this, but they're basically like disposable cameras, but they were underwater versions.
Yeah.
They had those back in the day. They were like full, like a ton of them in the little surf shops at the beach, in beach towns. But yeah, so yeah, they're in the pool, like underwater, taking pictures of each other. And it just kind of highlights that nostalgia of her looking back, but also like it kind of like is that, almost metaphor of like capturing the moment, like trying to remember that moment sort of thing. So yeah, it's a very short little sequence of underwater. So, I'm sneaking it in here, but I just love the movie that I wanted to highlight it here after Sun.
Okay. All right. So number 4, and this is super relevant because the trailer for the sequel just dropped, and I'm very excited.
All right.
I'm going to go with The Meg from 2018.
The Meg. This one I do know, but I haven't seen.
The Jason Statham absolute powerhouse. This movie, it's interesting to me. I feel like people didn't really like it as much as they could have, because it's like a US Chinese production.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who watches like a lot of foreign films, like I can kind of pick up on it, but it's definitely has some of that awkwardness that like watching a Chinese film can have sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was just, man, it's so much fun. Jason Statham gets to fight a megalodon. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah.
And
awesome.
The sequel looks bigger and more ridiculous in the best way. So
yeah. I've heard that this is actually secretly pretty good. Like it doesn't have good ratings really at solid. All.
It's just it's a dumb movie.
Yeah, sure.
But like, it's just a fun time. Like it's literally like, it's a turn your brain off, pop some popcorn, and have a good time watching Jason Statham fight a megalodon. It's good.
Yeah, so that's awesome. My 4th pick here is going to be, anytime I get the chance, I'm pretty sure I picked this movie for a different draft a couple of episodes ago, but anytime I get the chance to draft it for any reason, I'm going to, because I love Paddington 2. It's such a great movie. But there's a scene, where Paddington is stuck in a car and he's needing to be rescued, of course. And, it's the who is it? It's Sally Hawkins' character, who plays Mrs. Brown, goes and saves him. And yeah, I just love Paddington 2, and that's a good sequence. It's a good little rescue sequence. But have you seen the Paddington movies?
I've not seen either, but I know a lot of people unironically say like there's some
best movies. It's not ironic. I love them.
Like unironically, they have like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
Not that I like take Rotten Tomato scores that seriously.
Sure. But yeah, Paddington. It's funny. Paddington 2 is actually like, it has a very Wes Anderson feel to it. Not so much in like the humor necessarily, but in the way it's shot, it kind of has that Wes Anderson kind of detail and color to it. So, but yeah, Paddington 2 is a great movie and has a great little underwater scene. So, all right, where are you going? Number 5, last pick.
Oh man,
I'm expecting another. I'm going to be disappointed if it's not another monster.
I'm looking at my. I honestly, like I said, like I made a list. I have some of the more popular ones on here just so I could have them on hand. But I'm like I said, I'm just making a list of movies that I like where a lot of it's like underwater or whatever.
Yeah. Well, part of this is like people are going to hear things and be like, oh, I might be interested in that.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Okay. I'm stuck between 2, but one of them is pretty popular. So the other one I'll go with, my last pick, I'm going to go with The Shallows for 2016.
Okay.
Blake Lively is a surfer stuck on a rock after she had a bit of an accident while surfing. And there's a whale carcass not too far from her that has attracted a great white shark. And she's stuck on this rock in the middle of this little lagoon in the shallow area. Everyone's left the beach, and she basically has to figure out how to survive. Super satisfying movie. Firstly, it's like one of those movies where like she makes a lot of really smart decisions, and you gotta love in a movie, especially like a quote unquote horror thriller, although it's like not really scary at all.
Yeah.
But you just gotta love when like a character makes smart decisions, especially a female lead character who's like a obviously very attractive person. Like there's like certain assumptions about, it's, she's gonna be really dumb, but yeah, makes a lot of really smart decisions. And it's just one of those movies that's just super satisfying.
Yeah.
Like the ending and everything. And yeah, it's a good time. Also, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but it's the director of this film is the same guy he's worked with The Rock on a lot of stuff. Like he directed Black Adam, and this movie's like steps and bounds better direction than Black Adam or any of those other recent like like I think he did like Rampage or whatever. But
yeah,
just really solid, like a really like one person, one location. They have a problem they need to solve. How to get to the beach without getting attacked by the shark, because she has like a cut, she's bleeding, so the sharks are attracted to her as well. Yeah, it's just a fun, it's like 90 minutes, just a super solid like popcorn thriller, and just a satisfying watch. So
yeah, I love it.
There you go, didn't leave you disappointed.
Awesome.
My other option was going to be Pacific Rim, but I was like,
okay,
that one's too popular, people know that one.
Yeah, so man, I've got to tell you, I love that you went with the monster theme and stuck with it, but I feel like I've got this one in the bag as far as like a poll afterwards goes. But
I mean, I feel like
who
literally
cares,
I feel like literally all of mine, except for maybe the Meg or Deep Blue Sea, people are like, I've never even heard of that movie.
Yeah,
so it's all good.
So I could go the easy. Like I have a couple that like are obvious, and like I do love, like, especially Jaws. I love Jaws. I think it's like a way more like important and like powerful movie than like meets the eye.
It literally created the summer blockbuster.
Yeah, for one that, but just like thematically, I think it's I think it's a metaphor for like America and like the problems with our country. But anyways, we're not going to get into that. I could go with Nemo. Nemo is obvious. It's a good movie. I like Nemo a lot. But I'm not going to go with Jaws or Nemo, which, by the way, my first pick, Ponyo, the animation for underwater is much more fun than Nemo and much more beautiful. So go check out Ponyo. But I'm going to go with one that maybe less people have seen, just because I think I've already got this one in the bag. And I'm going to highlight one of my favorite movies from 2020 or 2021. Can't even remember in the moment. The Green Knight. Have you seen The Green Knight?
No, man. Again, it's one of those ones it was on my list. And it was like in theaters for like 2 weeks and just did not have a chance to go see it.
Yeah, so it's by David Lowery. It stars Dev Patel, who's just fantastic in it. And it's actually like kind of adapted from this like really, really old English poem.
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I believe.
Right, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, exactly. And so so it's it's a poem. It's really, there's a lot of lore behind it. But the movie is fantastic. It's visually just like incredible. But yeah, he's basically, it's a typical sort of like, chivalric journey, knight's journey kind of movie where it's like episodic. So he has he has like a quest he's going on, but along the way you have these kind of like episodes where he has to like, he's basically like proving his virtue in this way with this episode and this way with this episode. But actually like not proving it, because it's kind of like a twist on that sort of tale. but yeah, in one of them, there's this like ghost-like woman who, like his task, I guess you would say in that scene, is like he has to retrieve her head, and it's like underwater, so he has to, obviously, it's kind of like one of the more spooky scenes. But yeah, it's a really good sequence, and the movie just is so very good. I loved that movie. So yeah, The Green Knight is my last choice. Again, partly because it does have a good underwater scene, but also because I wanted to highlight a really good movie. So,
well, what if I would have known, I could have gone with movies that only had one scene underwater.
Hey, I told you that.
Yeah, I don't know. I you know what? I feel good about my list. I'm sticking with it. Like monster movies are like one of my guilty pleasure genres, so
yeah,
I will watch just about anything.
Yeah, I mean,
monster movie wise,
there's really not a ton of movies totally underwater except for maybe monster movies. But yeah,
it's also like there's not a whole lot of movies that like you said like are, well, yeah, I guess you kind of said the same thing, but not only are a lot of movies, like they don't really make a lot of movies about things underwater except for monster films. They're like some kind of creature from the deep, and I think it's because like the ocean is still such a mysterious place, so it really does work.
Yeah, so that's our draft. I'll read them back. JP got Underwater, The Cave, Deep Blue Sea, The Meg, and The Shallows with his monster theme. And I went with Ponyo, Casino Royale, After Sun, Paddington 2, and The Green Knights. And that was our draft for movies that are underwater.
The duality of man.
Yes. Underwater scenes. Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun one. I will say, I think I've got that one in the bag when I put the poll up, but who cares?
We'll see. We'll see.
You took your movies and they're fun. So yeah, we're going to wrap things up with recommendations of the week. JP, what do you got for a recommendation?
Man, I should have thought about this part more. I'll tell you what. I'll do this. I'll recommend a movie that I rewatched recently that I thought was it still feels really good. Maybe didn't like it as much as I liked it when I first saw it when I was younger, and it feels like more like a concept film, like a film that probably would have worked better as like a TV show. I'm gonna go with the movie Push from 2009, starring Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning.
Okay.
It's kind of a superhero film. Like it's like set in a world where a certain percentage of the population has like certain psychic powers. So there's like there's like telekinesis, telekinetics, and they all have cool names like pushers can move things, and then I can't remember some of the other names, but they all have like really cool. It's just really cool, interesting powers. You have people that can predict the future, people that can like take solid matter and like make you think you're seeing something else for a limited period of time. It still is a pretty solid movie. Like it's one of those movies that makes me really nostalgic for like those like mid 2000s style thrillers.
Yeah.
Like I think that, and like I watched like Safe House like last year, I think for the first time with Denzel Washington and Ryan Reynolds. And I know at the time we kind of hated it, but there's just something really nostalgic about like it's really like overexposed. It's like grain, like fake film grain.
Yeah.
There's all these like power zooms and like weird random cuts, like little montage scenes. But I don't know. I kind of miss it. So that's what I'll recommend is 2009's Push.
Okay. Yeah. That's I like that. That's fun. I think my recommendation, I'm just like making this up on the fly because I guess like you, I hadn't really thought about it before sitting down here. But yeah, so I'm going to recommend the band Vampire Weekend. It's for
you
one,
and my cousins and me and my cousins. Da, 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 da.
Yes.
Sorry. I like that song.
Yeah, Vampire Weekend is, I think they're probably one of my favorite bands, and Vampires of the Modern City. What is the name of that album? Like Vampires of the Modern City, I think is what it's called. It's one of my favorite albums just all time. Just they have this very like wide-ranging influenced indie pop rock kind of sound. Like you have kind of the classical music influence in the way the instrumentation and the kind of like melodies they have going on, and you even have kind of like almost like I would say I can't place the rhythms that they use, but I want to say like almost like African rhythms that they kind of have. It's something that is not American that they use in their like rhythm patterns. But it's like this eclectic mix
they're a little math rocky.
Yeah, in a way. But I felt like they were a good recommendation because they kind of have this like quirk and detail to them that Wes Anderson, to their music, that Wes Anderson kind of brings to his movies. And they even have a music video that's like styled in a Wes Anderson style. I can't remember which song it is that the music video is for, but yeah, they're very 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 good band. One thing I like about them is so I don't know, I'm weird in this way, like I'm a Christian, but also like I appreciate people that like are struggling with like religion and faith. And so like they have this very cynical but also honest approach to religion. Like a lot of their songs have a ton of religious overtones, and like just like they're obviously very cynical about it, but kind of honest in the way they approach lyrically like religion and its problems. And so I appreciate that aspect of them too. So yeah, I'm going to recommend the band Vampire Weekend. Also very catchy. Their songs will get stuck in your head.
Yeah, no, I definitely have a couple of their songs I really enjoy. Very cinematic band too. Like I feel like they have songs that, James Gunn might put in his next movie.
Sure. Yeah. So, JP, where can people find you? Social media, Letterboxd, give us all the things.
Yeah. Best place to connect with me is over on Instagram. My personal account, Jean-Pierre Boudreaux, or follow my creative brand agency, whatever you want to call it, Inhabit Creative Co. Super active on there, usually pretty much daily, sharing stuff. So yeah, I'd love to chat about movies anytime or anything else really.
Yeah. And we'll definitely link those in the episode description, so you can find it there. But yeah, it's been great having you, JP. I love the perspective you brought today, and it was a lot of fun having you on, and I think we'll be having you on again soon. I think in this series,
anytime,
if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, anytime. I love it, man. It was great.
Yeah. So yeah, great having you. And this has been the Establishing Shot, and I've been Eli Price, and we've had JP Boudreaux on, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on the Establishing Shot today. We hope you enjoyed the episode and got a lot out of it. Make sure before you go to like and subscribe on all your podcast platforms, and especially on Spotify and Apple. If you could leave a rating and review, that would greatly help the visibility of the podcast, and I would greatly appreciate it. Again, if you go to establishingshotpod.com, you can find out all you need to know about the show, where to find us on the social media platforms, where to find us podcast-wise, YouTube, and you can even leave a voicemail there on the website on the right side of your screen. So click that if you want to give a comment or ask a question about the show. Just feel free to leave a voicemail. We'd be happy to feature that on the show. And also, if you just want to email, rather than leave a voicemail, you can email us at establishingshotpod@gmail.com, and we would be happy to answer your question there or feature a question or comment on the show if it pertains to the episodes. So please do that. And we would love for you to join the Establishing Shot family. You can, again, find where to do that on the donate page at establishingshotpod.com. We hope you have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
We were happy here for a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.